You think you know pirates, skull flags, and treasure maps. Try scurvy. Try watching a man's leg get sawed off on deck. Try learning that freedom costs more than you ever imagined. This is pirate life. 20 chapters of what they don't tell you in the stories. Welcome to the Serpent's Grin.
You didn't choose this life. Nobody chooses this life. At first, it's just a shape on the horizon, a smudge of canvas against the endless blue. But within the hour, that smudge resolves into something that makes your stomach drop like an anchor. It's a ship, but it moves wrong, too fast, too deliberate. The sails are patched with mismatched cloth, and the hull looks like it's been chewed on by something with very large teeth. It's barely holding together, but it moves like it's possessed, cutting through the water with a predatory grace that no honest ship should have. Your captain, a weathered man named Dunley, squints through his spyglass, and his face goes the color of old parchment. He doesn't say anything at first. He doesn't need to. Everyone on deck knows what's coming. Your captain makes the decision for you. He orders the colors struck, the flag lowered in surrender. A few crew members protest, fists clenched, voices rising in anger and fear, but Dunley silences them with a look. He's been at sea long enough to know the mathematics of survival. The pirate ship has more guns, more men, and most importantly, more willingness to use both. Fighting would turn the Mary Catherine into kindling and every man aboard into chum.
The pirate ship pulls alongside with a sound like breaking bones, wood groaning against wood, ropes singing with tension. Then they come. The smell hits you before they do. Sweat, rum, old blood, and something else, something feral that makes your eyes water. What happens next is efficient and brutal in its simplicity. The pirates move through the Mary Catherine like a well-rehearsed routine. They haul up barrels, cut open crates, stuff their pockets with anything remotely valuable, which, disappointingly for them, isn't much. You hear one pirate complain loudly that white gold is harder to fence than the real thing, and another tells him to shut his mouth before the quartermaster hears him whining.
You try to make yourself small, invisible. You press your back against the main mast and hope that if you don't make eye contact, they'll leave you alone. It works for about 3 minutes.
The grip is iron. You're spun around to face a man who looks like he was carved from driftwood and bad decisions. His eyes are the color of dirty seawater, and they evaluate you with the dispassion of someone choosing which chicken to slaughter.
The words don't make sense at first. Your brain refuses to process them. Coming with them? Where? Why?
They call it press ganging. The term sounds almost polite, like you're being invited to a garden party. But there's nothing polite about it. It's kidnapping, plain and simple. Pirates do it when they need fresh bodies to replace the ones they've lost to disease, battle, or the simple arithmetic of a life lived on the edge of a blade. And right now, they need bodies.
You're shoved across a plank between the two ships. Below, the water churns like a living thing, dark and hungry. Don't look down, you tell yourself. Don't think about how deep it is. Don't think about what happens if you fall. The deck is chaos, coils of rope tangled like intestines, stains, rust, blood, something darker mar the wood in irregular patterns. The smell here is worse, thicker, a physical presence that coats your tongue and throat. You gag, and someone laughs,
a harsh, joyless sound. You want to ask what happens if you refuse. You want to demand they take you back. You want to scream. But the words die in your throat when you see the way the other pirates are looking at you, like you're a tool that hasn't proven useful yet, like you're on probation, and the penalty for failure is being thrown overboard with stones tied to your ankles. The Mary Catherine is released. You watch from the rail as your old ship limps away, lighter now, stripped of cargo and crew. Captain Dunley doesn't look back. You don't blame him. There's nothing he can do. Nothing anyone can do.
The pirate ship turns, catching the wind, and begins to move. Somewhere behind you, a man is singing a shanty in a voice made rough by rum and seawater. The melody is jaunty, inappropriate, obscene. Around you, the crew moves with practiced efficiency, adjusting sails, checking lines, their movements speaking of months or years spent learning this dance.
You stand on the deck, still reeling, still trying to understand what just happened. An hour ago, you were a merchant sailor with a future, modest, unglamorous, but yours. Now you're a pirate, an outlaw, a man who will hang if the Royal Navy ever catches him.
The sun is setting now, painting the Caribbean sky in shades of blood and fire. The water reflects it back, turning the ocean into a mirror of flame. It's beautiful in a way that makes your chest ache. Beautiful and terrible.
This is how it begins, not with a choice, not with a grand declaration of freedom or rebellion, but with misfortune, violence, and a hand on your shoulder dragging you into the most brutal job on earth. The Serpent's Grin sails into the gathering dark, and you sail with it. Behind you, the Mary Catherine is already a distant shadow on the horizon, fading like a memory of a life you used to have. The first night is when you understand what you've truly gotten yourself into. You land badly at the bottom, ankle twisting, hands catching yourself on wood so damp it feels almost soft. The darkness is absolute for a moment, until your eyes adjust and you realize there are small oil lanterns swinging from hooks, casting sick yellow light that makes everything look diseased. The air is thick enough to chew. It coats your tongue, fills your lungs, makes breathing feel like drowning slowly. Someone near you coughs, a wet rattling sound that speaks of lungs filled with something they shouldn't be filled with. Another man groans in his sleep, though whether from pain or nightmare you can't tell. "You'll get used to it," says a voice beside you. You turn to see one of the other pressed men from the Mary Catherine, the boy who was crying earlier. His face is streaked with dried tears and dirt. "That's what they told me. You'll get used to it." The wood beneath you is perpetually wet, not soaking, but damp, the kind of damp that never dries, that breeds rot and mold and things that make you sick. You can feel it now, seeping into your shirt, your trousers, your skin. By morning, if you survive until morning, you'll be as damp as everything else down here. Sleep should be impossible in these conditions, but exhaustion is a powerful drug, and you've been running on fear and adrenaline since the moment the pirate ship appeared on the horizon. Your body demands rest, even if your mind rebels against closing your eyes in this nightmare. Scratching. That's when you notice it. Everyone is scratching. The man to your left claws at his scalp in his sleep. Another pirate across from you digs at his armpit with the dedication of a man mining for gold. Even you feel it starting. A tickle at your hairline, an itch behind your ear.
Morning comes not with sunlight, that can't reach down here, but with noise. A bell clangs somewhere above, harsh and insistent. Around you, pirates stir and rise with the groaning reluctance of men who hate being alive. They move like the walking dead, stumbling in the dim light, kicking aside anyone still lying down.
The press of bodies toward the ladder is claustrophobic. Men shove and curse, desperate to escape the coffin below deck and breathe air that doesn't taste like other people's breath. You're carried along in the current, hands grabbing the ladder rungs slick with who knows what, pulling yourself up toward the square of gray morning light above. The deck in morning light looks somehow worse than it did yesterday. Details you missed in the chaos of boarding are now visible in the pale dawn. The stains aren't just stains, they're stories. Dark patches where blood soaked into wood grain, scorch marks from pistol fire, grooves carved by blade strikes. This deck has seen violence, and it remembers.
You there, new fish. A grizzled pirate points at you. His face is a road map of scars, and he's missing most of his left ear. You know how to tie a molin?
Rope turns out to be a man of few words and many expectations. He shows you once, just once, how he wants a particular splice done, then watches with critical eyes as you attempt to replicate it. Your fingers are clumsy at first, unused to working under such scrutiny, but muscle memory from your merchant sailing days takes over.
The work is endless. Every rope, every line, every bit of rigging on this ship is slowly deteriorating, frayed by salt, weakened by sun, worn by constant use. Your job, apparently, is to slow that deterioration just enough to keep the ship from literally falling apart. It's Sisyphean labor. You fix one section, and 3 more develop problems.
Around midday, a bell rings. The crew's response is immediate and visceral. Work stops. Men drop what they're doing and move toward the center deck, where a large pot, calling it a cauldron wouldn't be too dramatic, sits over a fire built in a sandbox. The ship's cook, a massive man with arms like ham hocks and a face that suggests he's been in one too many fights, stirs the pot with a paddle that looks like it's also used to beat people. You join the line of men waiting with wooden bowls. The smell from the pot is indescribable. It's not entirely bad. There's something savory under there, but it's mixed with notes of fish oil, old sweat, and disappointment. Cookie ladles a grayish-brown mixture into each bowl with the enthusiasm of a man serving his own execution. You find a spot on the deck and sit, examining your meal. Other pirates are already eating, shoveling the mixture into their mouths with carved wooden spoons, or just tipping the bowls back and drinking it. No one complains. No one comments on the taste or quality. They eat because not eating means dying, and dying means not getting a share of the next plunder. Next to your stew, someone passes you a piece of hardtack, ship's biscuit, the staple of any long voyage. You've eaten hardtack before on the Mary Catherine, but this specimen is something else entirely. It's not just hard, it's fossilized. You knock it against the deck, and it sounds like stone hitting wood. When you look closely, you can see small holes in it, weevil holes. The bugs have been and gone, leaving behind their tunnels like miners abandoning a spent claim. You soak your hardtack in the stew to soften it, a trick every sailor knows. Even then, biting into it is like chewing on wood that's been pre-chewed by something with better teeth than yours. But it fills your stomach. It gives you something to do with your hands. And most importantly, it's keeping you alive, which is more than many men in your position can say.
As the day wears on and the sun climbs toward its brutal zenith, you begin to understand the rhythm of this floating prison. Everything is wet or damp or rotting. Everyone itches. The food is barely food. Sleep is a form of torture. The work never ends. And yet, the ship continues. The crew functions. This nightmare has a system, a structure, a terrible logic that keeps it moving forward. As evening approaches and the sky begins its nightly performance of blood and gold, you stand at the rail and look out at the endless Caribbean. Somewhere out there is civilization. Somewhere out there are laws and order and ships that don't smell like death. Somewhere out there is the life you used to have.
On your third morning aboard the Serpent's Grin, something unexpected happens. The crew is summoned. The quartermaster steps forward. His name is Flint, and he's a different breed from the captain. Where Captain Merrick is all swagger and threat, Flint is cold calculation. He's the man who manages the crew, settles disputes, and, most importantly, enforces the code. He holds a piece of parchment that looks like it's been folded and unfolded 1,000 times, stained with salt water and God knows what else. He unfolds the parchment with ceremonial care and begins to read. His voice is flat, bureaucratic, as if he's reading a merchant contract rather than the bylaws of criminality. Flint continues, unmoved by the confusion on the new recruits' faces. Article 2. Every man to be called fairly in turn by list on board of prizes, because over and above their proper share they are allowed a shift of clothes. But if they defraud the company to the value of $1 in plate, jewels, or money, marooning shall be their punishment.
Article 3. No person to game at cards or dice for money.
A few pirates chuckle at this. Apparently it's a rule honored more in the breach than the observance.
Article 4. The lights and candles to be put out at 8 o'clock at night. If any of the crew desire to drink after that hour, they are to sit upon the open deck.
Flint's voice never wavers. Article 5. To keep their piece, pistols, and cutlass clean and fit for service. He looks up meaningfully at this one, and several pirates suddenly find their boots very interesting. Weapon maintenance is clearly not everyone's priority. Article 7. To desert the ship or their quarters in battle is punishable by death or marooning. Flint pauses here, letting the weight of it sink in. This isn't a guideline. This is survival. A ship where men abandon their posts in combat is a ship that sinks, taking everyone with it. The quartermaster continues through the articles with mechanical precision. Compensation for injuries. The loss of a right arm is worth 600 pieces of 8, a left arm 500, a right leg 500, a left leg 400, an eye 100. It's macabre accounting, putting a price tag on body parts like they're cargo. Article 12, Flint reads, and his voice takes on a harder edge. The musicians to have rest on the Sabbath day, but the other 6 days and nights, none without special favor. Article 13. The captain and quartermaster to receive 2 shares of a prize. The master, boatswain, and gunner 1 share and a half. All other officers 1 1/4. Private men 1 share each. Flint finishes reading and looks up, scanning the assembled crew. Any man who refuses to sign the articles or make his mark goes over the side, right now. No discussion. The boy who cried on his first night steps up first. His hand shakes as he takes the quill. He can't write. You can tell by the way he holds it, so he makes his mark, a crude X next to his name, which Flint writes for him. The boy looks like he might vomit. He's just signed away his soul.
Then it's your turn. You step forward and Flint's cold eyes meet yours. Name? Your hand hovers over the parchment. The entire crew is watching, waiting, some with amusement, others with impatience. Sign or swim? Those are your options. Sign, and maybe, possibly, survive long enough to escape this nightmare. Or refuse and die right now. Your body food for whatever lurks in the Caribbean deep. As you step back, your legs feel unsteady. What have you just done? In Port Royal, in Kingston, in every British port from here to London, your name is now on a document that declares you an outlaw. If this ship is ever taken, if these articles are ever found, you'll hang alongside men who actually chose this life. Later, as the crew disperses back to their duties, Rope explains it to you while you're working on a particularly stubborn splice. The articles are why we don't murder each other every damn day, he says, testing the tension on a line. You put this many desperate men on a floating box, no rules, and you get chaos. Can't sail in chaos, can't fight in chaos, can't survive in chaos. You begin to see evidence of the articles in action over the following days. 2 pirates get into a screaming match over a dice game. Fists are raised. But before it comes to blows, someone shouts, "Flint!" and both men immediately stop. They glare at each other with pure hatred, but they don't fight. Article 8. No striking another aboard ship. The voting right turns out to be real too. When a debate breaks out about whether to chase a distant sail or continue toward a rumored rich merchant route, Captain Merrick doesn't just decide. He calls for a vote. Every man, including you, barely 5 days aboard, raises his hand for one option or the other. You're beginning to understand the perverse genius of it. The articles create a twisted democracy, a nightmare meritocracy, where the only thing that matters is whether you can do your job and not get killed. It doesn't matter if you were born in a mansion or a gutter. It doesn't matter if you're educated or illiterate. It doesn't even matter if you wanted to be here. That night, lying on your damp boards below deck, surrounded by snoring, scratching, suffering pirates, you think about the parchment with your signature on it. It's probably stored in the captain's cabin, along with whatever other documents and maps and stolen ledgers they've accumulated. If there's a hell specifically designed for your taste buds, it exists in Cookie's galley. You discover this definitively on your 6th day aboard, when you're assigned to help him prepare the midday meal. It's not a reward, it's punishment for moving too slowly on a rope repair. "Go help Cookie," Rope had said, with something that might have been sympathy in his eyes. "You," Cookie grunts, pointing a knife the size of a cutlass at you. "Chop those." "Smaller," Cookie demands, stirring the pot with a paddle that has stains suggesting it's been used for purposes other than cooking. "Smaller, or the men will break their teeth, and then they'll break your teeth." Next, Cookie directs you to a sack of hardtack biscuits, not to serve them, that comes later, but to break them up into chunks to add to the stew. "Thickens it," he explains, though his tone suggests he's defending a questionable decision. "Fills the belly." You knock the biscuits against the side of the pot, watching larvae rain into the fire where they sizzle and die. It's a losing battle. Every biscuit is infested. The weevils have claimed this food supply as their own,
and you're just temporarily evicting them from their holes before grinding their homes into the stew.
Now the good stuff, Cookie says, with what might be pride, pulling out a netted bag of onions. They're soft, sprouting green shoots from their tops, and several are partially rotted. But they're vegetables, actual plant matter, which apparently qualifies as luxury on this floating nightmare. Then he dumps the onions into the pot, followed by a generous handful of something from an unlabeled sack. Peas, he announces, though the shriveled gray pellets look more like gravel. Next comes a bottle of liquid that might be vinegar, or might be something that spontaneously became vinegar through sheer age and neglect. He doesn't measure, he just pours until it feels right.
Cookie stirs with his massive paddle, occasionally tasting by dipping a finger directly into the boiling mixture, licking it and grunting. His tongue must be made of leather. The temperature would blister your mouth, but he just frowns and adds more salt. Always more salt. Salt is the solution to every culinary problem on a ship. It preserves, it flavors, it masks the taste of rot.
As the mixture bubbles and reduces, the smell evolves. It starts as generic meat and salt, progresses through an unfortunate phase that smells like wet dog, briefly touches on something almost savory, then settles into its final form, defeat. It smells like defeat, like giving up, like survival at the expense of joy.
Bowls, Cookie commands, and you help distribute the wooden bowls that serve as the crew's dishes. They're communal, never really washed, just rinsed with seawater if they're lucky. Each bowl carries the memory of every previous meal, layered like sediment in rock. You try not to think about it as you stack them on the serving table.
Cookie begins serving with the efficiency of a man performing a well-rehearsed execution. Slap of ladle into bowl. Gray-brown stew with chunks of ambiguous meat and dissolved hardtack. A piece of the newer, less infested hardtack on the side. Next man. Repeat. It's an assembly line of barely adequate nutrition.
You take your own bowl last, after helping Cookie serve 70 men. Your arms ache from ladling. Your hands smell like rancid fat and salt. The stew looks no more appealing from this side of the pot. If anything, seeing how it's made has made it worse.
Around you, the crew eats in silence. Not companionable silence, just the absence of things to say about a meal that defies comment. Someone coughs. Someone else farts with the casual indifference of a man who has no privacy to protect. A pirate near you picks something out of his stew, examines it, shrugs, and eats it anyway. After the meal, you're assigned to cleanup. This means scraping the pot, rinsing the bowls with seawater, and trying to restore some semblance of order to the galley area. Cookie supervises with the enthusiasm of a man who would rather be literally anywhere else.
That night, lying on your damp boards, your stomach alternates between grateful to be full and resentful of what it's full of. Around you, the crew experiences their own digestive consequences. The air below deck, already foul, takes on new and creative dimensions of unpleasantness. Over the following days, you begin to understand the rhythm of Cookie's defeat. Every meal is a variation on the same theme. Stretch what little they have to feed too many men. Make it salty enough that no one can really taste it. Make it hot enough that eating it becomes a form of distraction. Make it thick enough that it feels substantial, even when it's mostly water and dissolved biscuit.
Once, just once, the ship catches fresh fish. A massive school of something silver passes under the hull, and the crew deploys nets and hooks with desperate enthusiasm. They pull up dozens of fish, flopping and gleaming in the Caribbean sun.
fresh protein, actual fresh food. You ask Rope one day why they don't get a better cook. He laughs, actually laughs, which you've never seen him do. Cookie's not a cook, he explains. He's a fighter who happens to feed us. Last cook tried to steal more than his share. Cookie beat him with a soup ladle. We kept Cookie. Weeks into your new life, you find yourself at the serving table again, holding out your bowl for Cookie's ladle. The stew is the same gray-brown mixture it's always been. The smell is the same defeat it's always been. The chunks are the same mystery they've always been. There's a moment about 2 weeks into your life aboard the Serpent's Grin when you realize your socks have achieved sentience. Hygiene on the Serpent's Grin is not a priority. It's not even a consideration. It's a joke that nobody's laughing at because everyone's too busy itching, oozing, or quietly rotting. Once every few days, when the crew can't stand themselves anymore, there's a communal wash on deck. A barrel is filled with seawater, hauled up in buckets. Men line up to splash their faces, their hands, maybe their armpits if they're feeling ambitious. The salt stings any open wounds, and everyone has open wounds. Rope burns, splinters, the constant abrasion of rough fabric against skin that's never quite dry. The concept of a bath is laughable. Some men jump overboard when the ship is anchored, diving into the warm Caribbean water to rinse themselves. But this comes with risks. Sharks patrol these waters, and the water itself, near any harbor or anchorage, is contaminated with sewage from every ship in the area, a floating soup of human waste that you're voluntarily immersing yourself in. The itching is constant. You've never experienced itching like this. It's not localized. It's everywhere, all at once, demanding attention. Your scalp, your armpits, your groin, between your toes, behind your ears. Every warm, damp fold of your body has become a paradise for parasites. Rope shows you the pirate solution. Shave your head. Less real estate for the bastards, he explains, running a hand over his own stubbled scalp. Many of the crew sport similar looks, not for fashion, but for survival. Hair is just another thing to harbor filth. Then there's the ship's head, the bathroom, if you can call it that. It's not a room. It's not even a structure. It's a plank, a single board extended off the back of the ship, over the water, with 2 ropes to hold onto for balance. That's it. That's where 70 men relieve themselves. You edge out onto the plank, gripping the ropes with white-knuckled intensity. The board bounces slightly with each wave. The ship is moving, which means the plank is moving, which means you're trying to maintain balance while suspended over shark-infested water with your pants down. The truly horrifying moment comes when you attempt to use the head during rough weather. The ship pitches and rolls. The plank bucks like a wild animal. Spray soaks you from below. You cling to the ropes, terror warring with biological necessity, certain that this is how you'll die, swept off a toilet plank into the Caribbean Sea with your trousers around your ankles. But the real biological horror isn't the lice or the head, it's the infections. Everything gets infected, every scrape, every splinter, every blister that pops. In an environment where nothing is clean and nothing stays dry, wounds don't heal, they fester. Your own body begins to show signs of adaptation or surrender. Your feet, constantly damp in your ruined boots, develop a permanent prune-like texture. The skin between your toes cracks and bleeds. A rash spreads across your chest, angry red patches that itch and weep. You don't know what it is, neither does anyone else. It's just one more thing wrong with your body in a place where everything is wrong. Clothing becomes part of the problem. You're wearing the same shirt and trousers you were pressed in weeks ago. They're stiff with salt, sweat, and substances you don't want to identify. The fabric chafes in places where chafing creates new wounds, which then get infected, which then make the chafing worse. It's a cycle of misery with no exit. One morning, you wake up and notice something moving on your arm. At first, you think it's a trick of the dim light, but no, there's something crawling on your skin. Multiple somethings. Small, flat, dark shapes that scatter when you try to grab them.
The crew's odor is a living thing. In the close quarters below deck, it achieves a density that feels almost solid. It's not just unwashed bodies, though that's the foundation. It's layered. Sweat, old and new, the sour smell of clothes that have never fully dried, breath that tastes of rotten teeth and poor diet, farts that linger in the still air like malevolent spirits, feet that have evolved beyond merely smelling bad into something that could qualify as a weapon. Teeth become a particular source of anxiety. You've never thought much about dental hygiene in your old life. Most people don't, beyond basic efforts. But on a ship with no dentist, no proper cleaning tools, and a diet designed to break teeth, every twinge becomes a source of terror. Your beard, if you're growing one, becomes another source of discomfort. Food gets trapped in it, salt crystallizes in it, lice nest in it. But shaving is dangerous with a dull knife on a moving ship, and you've seen the infections that result from shaving cuts in this environment. So you let it grow, adding another layer to your transformation into something that barely resembles the person you used to be. Occasionally, usually after heavy rain, there's a brief opportunity to collect fresh water in barrels and canvas sheets. The crew goes silent, almost reverent, as they position containers to catch the rain. This water is precious, for drinking primarily, but sometimes, if there's enough, for washing. The ship itself is diseased. The wood below deck is rotting in places, soft and spongy with moisture and mold. Black fungus grows in the corners where light never reaches. The bilge water at the very bottom is a toxic soup that occasionally needs to be pumped out, a job assigned as punishment because the smell is legendary even among pirates. Despite everything, or perhaps because of everything, the crew functions. Men perform their duties with weeping sores and festering wounds. They climb the rigging with infected rope burns. They stand watch with fevers. The human body, it turns out, can adapt to almost anything if the alternative is death. One night, lying on your damp boards, surrounded by the sounds and smells of 70 filthy men, you tried to remember what it felt like to be clean, really, properly clean. Fresh clothes against washed skin, hair that doesn't crawl with lice, feet that don't squelch in your boots. You hear about Gristle long before you see him. The way men talk about him, you'd think he was a ghost that lives between heartbeats, a name murmured whenever someone cuts a hand, bangs a knee, or coughs too hard. Not see the surgeon, but you'll have to see Gristle. Always said with a wince, always with the tone of someone offering sympathy, not hope. They say he got his nickname because he can find the gristle in any wound and pull it out. They also say he drinks more rum than the rest of the crew combined. Both things turn out to be true. You meet him properly the first time a real injury happens within your small orbit. A pirate named Harlow misjudges a swinging boom and takes it square in the mouth. You hear the crack from halfway across the deck, a sickening, wet sound that makes your teeth ache in sympathy. He goes down with both hands over his face,
blood spilling between his fingers, teeth scattered on the planks like tossed dice. Someone shouts for Gristle. Not the captain, not the quartermaster, not a priest. Gristle.
Gristle emerges from below like some creature dragged up from the bilge. He's not old exactly, but life has carved years into him that the calendar didn't. His hair is a tangled mat of gray and black, tied back with a strip of cloth that was once white. His beard looks like it's hiding secrets. He wears a stained shirt that might have been brown at one point, but is now mostly the color of old wounds. What you notice most are his hands. Thick, scarred fingers, stained permanently with things you don't want to name. Hands that look like they've been inside more men than any lover ever has.
"Let me see," Gristle says, kneeling beside Harlow. There's no gentleness in his tone, but there's no panic either. Panic is for men whose mistakes cost their own lives. Gristle's mistakes cost other people theirs. Harlow removes his bloody hands from his face. His lip is split, teeth broken and missing, one tooth bent at an angle that makes your own jaw ache. Blood runs down his chin in thick lines. Gristle grips his jaw like he's checking a horse at market. "Nothing that'll kill you," he grunts. "Open." Harlow tries. Gristle forces it. You expect bandages. You expect maybe a stitched lip, something neat and careful. Instead, Gristle reaches into a leather roll lying beside him, a surgeon's kit that looks more like a butcher's travel set. A rusted hook, a saw that smells faintly of rot, iron tongs blackened from use and fire, a few curved needles, a bottle of something clear that might be spirits, might be poison. Nothing looks clean, nothing looks reassuring. He picks up the tongs, tests the hinge with his thumb, and warms the metal briefly over a nearby lantern flame, as if that passes for sterilization.
"Hold him," Gristle orders. Two pirates pin Harlow's shoulders and arms to the deck. Another grips his legs. Harlow starts to struggle when he sees the tongs. "Wait, wait," he tries to say, but his words dissolve into bloody mumbling. Gristle doesn't wait. He pours a splash of rum into Harlow's mouth. Half of it spills down his chin. The rest vanishes between broken teeth. Then Gristle takes a long pull from the same bottle himself, wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, and sets the rum aside. "That's all the mercy you're getting," he says. You have never seen pain land on a man like it lands on Harlow. Gristle pries his mouth open and clamps the tongs around the ruined tooth. There's a heartbeat of stillness, a silence so complete you can hear the creak of the ship's hull. Then Gristle pulls. The sound is a mix of wet and crunch, like a crab shell crushed under a boot. Harlow's scream rips through the air, a raw animal noise that doesn't sound entirely human. His legs kick, muscles straining against the men holding him. One hand breaks free and claws at the deck, nails splintering. The tooth doesn't want to leave. You can see it, Gristle's arm flexing, tendons standing out in his neck, the tongs trembling with the effort. Harlow's eyes roll back, his scream climbing in pitch until it breaks. For a moment you think he's going to pass out. You almost hope he does. Then, with a tiny, horrible pop, the tooth gives way. Blood sprays. Something pale flies from the tongs and lands on the deck with a wet clink. Gristle lets go, finally, and Harlow slumps, sobbing, spitting red.
Gristle stoops and picks up the tooth. It's not just a tooth. It's a small piece of bone and rot, jagged at the root, a fragment of something that's been dead inside Harlow's mouth for a long time. Gristle inspects it like a craftsman examining a finished piece. "Rotten to hell," he mutters. "Should have come out months ago." He tosses it over the side like it never mattered. You don't realize you're shaking until Rope nudges your shoulder. "That's a good one," Rope says. "Quick."
Sometimes he has to go in more than once. Sometimes he breaks the tooth and has to dig the rest out in pieces. You swallow hard. Your own teeth suddenly feel like they're made of glass. Every slight ache, every twinge you ever ignored now feels like a ticking fuse leading straight to Gristle's tongs. You decide you'd rather chew on one side of your mouth for the rest of your life than tell him about a toothache.
Later, you see Gristle at work again, this time on something worse than a tooth. A pirate named Bran takes a splinter the size of a knitting needle in his thigh when a cannon recoils unexpectedly. At first, he laughs it off. Just wood, just a scrape. By the next day, his leg is swollen and hot. By the day after, you can smell it when he limps past. That sweet, rotten smell of flesh deciding it's done being part of a body. Gristle has him laid out on a table below deck, under a swinging lantern that makes the whole scene feel like a nightmare rocking gently with the ship.
The tools are the same: knife, tongs, hooks, rum. There is no anesthesia, no laudanum, no clean cloths or boiled instruments. Gristle pours rum over the wound, wipes his hands on his shirt, and goes in. The knife cuts into Bran's leg with sickening ease, skin and muscle parting under the blade. Bran bites down on a strip of leather. His scream is muffled, but you can see it in the way his body arches, the tendons in his neck standing out like ropes. Gristle doesn't flinch. He cuts, digs, searches with bloody fingers until he finds the splinter lodged deep in the muscle and pulls it out. Longer than you thought, slick with blood and pus. "You're lucky," Gristle tells Bran, dropping the bloody wood into a bowl. "Another day and I'd have taken the leg." Bran's eyes roll toward him in terror. Gristle shrugs as if discussing the weather. Losing a limb is just another option on his list of procedures. A leg here, an arm there. Flesh is negotiable. Infection is not. He pours more rum into the wound, ignoring Bran's strangled howl, then wraps the leg in bandages that were clean at some point in their distant past.
The saw, though, you don't see the saw in use. Not yet. You only see it when Gristle unrolls his kit to resharpen his tools. The saw lies there, teasing the edge of your imagination. Its teeth, small and sharp, designed for bone, not wood. The handle is worn smooth by hands that have picked it up more often than you want to think about. You ask, quietly, how many arms and legs he's taken. Gristle looks at you for a long moment before answering. "Enough," he says. "Not as many as some, more than others. If you're lucky, you'll never see it used. If you're luckier, you'll be dead before you need it."
Gristle's surgery space is a world apart from the rest of the ship. It's not cleaner. If anything, it's worse. The smell of blood and old wounds lingers in the wood. The table is scarred with knife marks, stained dark in overlapping rings. Shelves hold jars with unidentifiable things floating in cloudy liquid, bits of preserved flesh, coils of something that might have been intestine once, maybe examples, maybe trophies. There are bandages, bottles, rolls of rough thread. Nothing has the crisp, clean feeling of proper medicine. Everything here has been used and reused, washed when possible, wiped when not. And yet, in a brutal way, Gristle is as close to a miracle as this ship gets. Men who would die without intervention sometimes live because he cuts early and hard. He knows when to lance, when to let something drain, when to burn a wound with a heated knife to stop bleeding. He recognizes fever before it takes hold. He recognizes when the only way to save a life is to amputate. No one thanks him. They curse him. They fear him. But they come to him all the same when the pain gets bad enough, because the only other option is letting the sea take them slow.
Your turn under his hands comes sooner than you'd like. It starts with a tooth, a dull ache in the back of your jaw that you ignore, You tell yourself it's just from clenching your teeth, from grinding them in your sleep, from stress, anything but rot. Then it gets worse, a tiny jolt of pain every time you bite, a throb that pulses with your heartbeat. One night, the pain wakes you up, white hot and blinding, radiating up into your skull and down your neck. Your whole world narrows to the agony of that single tooth. You stagger to Gristle because you can't not.
Sit, he says, as if you're a dog. You sit on a barrel, hands gripping the edge so hard your knuckles go white. The ship sways, your vision swims. Gristle peers into your mouth, breath smelling of run and old tobacco. Rotten, he announces. Roots gone bad. You waited too long. You want to argue. You want to tell him you didn't want this, that you were trying to be brave, to avoid those iron tongs. But all that comes out is a whimper when he picks them up.
He warms the tongs over a candle until the metal is just shy of glowing. Not enough to sterilize in any meaningful way, but enough to make you imagine what they'll feel like. He splashes a little rum into your mouth. You swallow. It burns, but it's a whisper against the roaring fire already raging in your jaw. Hold still, Gristle says. You try. You fail. It doesn't matter. The pirates holding your shoulders and head make sure you're not going anywhere. The tongs clamp around the bad tooth. The metal is hot. The pain is indescribable, a spike of blinding electric agony that explodes behind your eyes. You hear yourself scream from far away, like it's someone else's mouth. When it's over, you're shaking and half blind with tears. The tooth hits the deck with a small, obscene sound. You taste blood and iron and the sour ghost of infection. Your jaw throbs, but the terrible drilling pain is gone, replaced by something duller, something survivable. Gristle shoves a wad of filthy cloth between your teeth. Bite, he says. You'll live. You nod, unable to speak, clutching the side of the barrel as the ship rolls. Your entire world is your aching jaw and the memory of hot iron tearing something rotten out of you. As you stumble away, you realize something unsettling. Gristle's theater of pain is the only real medicine you have. No herbs, no tonics, no clean white sheets, just rusted tools, rough hands, and a bottle of rum. It is crude, it is brutal, it is barbaric. And on this ship, it is the closest thing to mercy you will ever know. Scurvy doesn't arrive with a roar. It seeps in quietly, like rot in the beams. At first, it hides in small things, a bruise that takes too long to fade, a cut that should have scabbed over but stays raw and weeping, a strange tiredness that settles into the crew like a fog, making even simple tasks feel like climbing uphill. You're used to exhaustion out here, but this is different. This is exhaustion with weight, like someone has slipped stones into your bones. The real sign starts in your mouth. Your gums used to be just part of you, background flesh doing its job without complaint. Now they make themselves known. They feel thicker, more tender when you run your tongue across them. Biting into anything harder than soaked biscuit sends a dull ache through your jaw. You notice a metallic taste now and then, faint, like the ghost of a coin on your tongue. One morning you spit over the rail and see it clearly, pink foam on the water. You look to your left and right. Other men are spitting too. Pink, red. Some try to hide it, wiping their mouths on their sleeves, but the stains give them away. No one says the word yet. They don't have to. You've all heard the stories in portside taverns. You didn't want to believe them. Now your own body is confirming everyone. Scurvy. The food doesn't help. Cookie's pot has long since run out of anything that ever saw a tree or a vine. No limes, no oranges, no fresh anything. Just meat that died twice, once when it was slaughtered, again when it was salted, and biscuit that might as well be scraped off the underside of time. The only green on the ship is mold, and no one's desperate enough to eat that. Not yet. Your gums turn from irritated to obscene. They swell, pushing down over your teeth like wet rags. When you press a fingertip into them, they hold the dent for a heartbeat before slowly rising back, spongy and wrong. They bleed if you touch them. They bleed if you don't. Someone jokes, because you have to joke, that everyone's gums look like chewed velvet, and now you can't unsee it. Eating becomes a kind of slow torture. You can't bite properly anymore. Hardtack has to be soaked until it gives up and falls apart. Meat is gnawed at carefully, using the least painful teeth, working around the worst spots. Some men begin to swallow their food in half-chewed chunks just to avoid touching the gums at all. Meals become quiet, not out of manners, but because talking hurts. Then your teeth begin to move. It's small at first. One tooth feels a little loose, just enough that your tongue keeps returning to it, testing. Another wobbles when the ship lurches and your jaws snap shut by reflex. The solid architecture of your mouth, that dependable arrangement you've had since childhood, has turned into a row of posts in soft mud, shifting with every wave. You start to see it in others. Men working beside you, breathing hard, their lips pulling back in unguarded grimaces that show teeth sitting at strange angles. A laugh that ends in a wince as someone forgets and slams their jaw closed. One pirate spits, curses, and you hear something hard hit the deck. He stares down at the small white thing lying there. For a long moment he doesn't pick it up. When he does, he examines it with a kind of detached horror. It's his tooth. Old wounds begin to reopen. Scars you earned years ago, knife lines, bullet tracks, the pale signatures of past stupidity start to redden at the edges. One evening you notice a thin line on your forearm, an old cut from a cargo hook back on the Mary Catherine, looking angrier than it has any right to. By morning, it's seeping a thin, watery blood. Nobody reopened it. Your body just decided to. You watch Rope peel back a bandage on his shoulder, expecting to see the same old healed gash he's carried as long as you've known him. Instead, the skin is split again along the old line, as if time has been reversed in that one place. "Golden age, my arse," he mutters, rewrapping it, and for once there's no humor in his voice at all. The so-called age of glory is rotting from the inside out. Bruises bloom from nothing. Men wake up with dark patches on their arms, legs, ribs, spreading like spilled ink under the skin. A hand clapped to a shoulder leaves a mark that doesn't fade. Kneeling hard on a deck plank prints your own bones onto your skin in purple and yellow. You watch a pirate bump his hip lightly against a rail and earn a bruise that looks like he's been clubbed. Everyone moves more carefully now, not out of caution, but out of self-defense against their own bodies. The tiredness deepens. It's not just weariness from long watches and hard work. It's something hollowing you out from the inside. Climbing the rigging feels like hauling your own corpse up after you. Carrying a coil of rope leaves you breathless. Men lean on the rails between tasks, chests heaving, not because the work was so hard, but because they have nothing left to give to it. Even the loud ones grow quiet. Songs die off. Jokes trail away halfway through. Laughter, when it comes, sounds thin, like it doesn't have the strength to fully form. Men sit together, not talking, not looking at each other's mouths. There are more naps in odd corners, not chosen naps, but the kind where someone sits down for a moment and just doesn't get back up for a while.
Gristle knows exactly what's happening. He doesn't have a fancy name for it, no book-learning words, but he's seen this before. He pokes your gums with a thick finger, nods once, and pulls away before you can bite him by reflex. Rot from the inside, he says. Too long without the right greens. Body forgets how to hold itself together.
You ask what he can do. He looks at you like you've asked him to turn the sea to wine. I can cut, he says. I can burn. I can pull things out of you that don't belong. But I can't stitch what isn't there. You want this to stop. You need fruit, greens, things that don't come in barrels. He gestures vaguely toward the endless horizon. Find land. Pray there's something on it we can chew that isn't salted to death. Until then, don't lose too many teeth. You start paying attention to the rare exceptions. A few of the older hands hoard things from shore leaf, a scrap of dried citrus peel tucked into a pouch, a shriveled bit of something they swear was once a lime. One man has a small jar with what he claims is preserved lemon rind. You see him chew a sliver off it sometimes, face scrunching at the sourness, eyes closed like it's a prayer. When one of those men offers you a tiny scrap, a curl of something hard and brown that still, impossibly, smells faintly sharp, you take it like a sacrament. You press it to your tongue, and the sourness hits hard, a shock that makes your eyes water, your gums burn, your whole mouth protests. For a moment, you feel more alive than you have in days. Then it's gone, swallowed, and you're left wanting more of something that doesn't exist on this ship. The worst cases start to drop out of the rotation. At first, they just work slower. Then they stop coming on deck at all. You see them lying below on the damp boards, eyes sunken, skin gone a strange yellow-gray. Their legs are mottled with bruises that look almost black. Some of them bleed from the nose in their sleep. Gristle does what he can, mostly rum and rapping and muttered curses, but he can't put back what the food has taken away. One morning you help carry a man up onto the deck, not because he's recovered, but because he wants to see the sky one last time. His gums are a nightmare, swollen so far over his teeth you can barely see the white. When he smiles weakly at some crude joke, it's like looking into a skull padded with rotten meat. He watches the sunrise, says nothing, and is gone by nightfall. The sea gets him, as it gets everyone in the end. As days blur together, you feel yourself thinning out, not just in body, but in something deeper. Your gums are chewed velvet, your teeth wiggle when the ship rolls. Old wounds itch and weep like they're remembering how to be fresh. This is the golden age they'll talk about in books someday, you think. Bright flags, bold captains, and underneath it all, a crew quietly rotting from the inside out. Scurvy's velvet grip doesn't crush, it unravels, and you can feel the first threads of yourself starting to come loose. Scurvy doesn't arrive with a roar. It seeps in quietly, like rot in the beams. At first, it hides in small things, a bruise that takes too long to fade, a cut that should have scabbed over but stays raw and weeping, a strange tiredness that settles into the crew like a fog, making even simple tasks feel like climbing uphill. You're used to exhaustion out here, but this is different. This is exhaustion with weight, like someone has slipped stones into your bones.
The real sign starts in your mouth. Your gums used to be just part of you, background flesh, doing its job without complaint. Now they make themselves known. They feel thicker, more tender when you run your tongue across them. Biting into anything harder than soaked biscuit sends a dull ache through your jaw. You notice a metallic taste now and then, faint, like the ghost of a coin on your tongue.
One morning, you spit over the rail and see it clearly, pink foam on the water. You look to your left and right. Other men are spitting too, pink, red. Some try to hide it, wiping their mouths on their sleeves, but the stains give them away. No one says the word yet. They don't have to. You've all heard the stories in portside taverns. You didn't want to believe them. Now your own body is confirming every one.
Scurvy. The food doesn't help. Cookie's pot has long since run out of anything that ever saw a tree or a vine. No limes, no oranges, no fresh anything. Just meat that died twice, once when it was slaughtered, again when it was salted, and biscuit that might as well be scraped off the underside of time. The only green on the ship is mold, and no one's desperate enough to eat that. Not yet. Your gums turn from irritated to obscene. They swell, pushing down over your teeth like wet rags. When you press a fingertip into them, they hold the dent for a heartbeat before slowly rising back, spongy and wrong. They bleed if you touch them. They bleed if you don't. Someone jokes, because you have to joke, that everyone's gums look like chewed velvet, and now you can't unsee it. Eating becomes a kind of slow torture. You can't bite properly anymore. Hardtack has to be soaked until it gives up and falls apart. Meat is gnawed at carefully, using the least painful teeth, working around the worst spots. Some men begin to swallow their food in half-chewed chunks, just to avoid touching the gums at all. Meals become quiet, not out of manners, but because talking hurts. Then your teeth begin to move. It's small at first. One tooth feels a little loose, just enough that your tongue keeps returning to it, testing. Another wobbles when the ship lurches and your jaws snap shut by reflex. The solid architecture of your mouth, that dependable arrangement you've had since childhood, has turned into a row of posts in soft mud, shifting with every wave. You start to see it in others. Men working beside you, breathing hard, their lips pulling back in unguarded grimaces that show teeth sitting at strange angles. A laugh that ends in a wince as someone forgets and slams their jaw closed. One pirate spits, curses, and you hear something hard hit the deck. He stares down at the small white thing lying there. For a long moment he doesn't pick it up. When he does, he examines it with a kind of detached horror. It's his tooth. Old wounds begin to reopen. Scars you earned years ago, knife lines, bullet tracks, the pale signatures of past stupidity start to redden at the edges. One evening you notice a thin line on your forearm, an old cut from a cargo hook back on the Mary Catherine, looking angrier than it has any right to. By morning, it's seeping a thin, watery blood. Nobody reopened it. Your body just decided to. You watch Rope peel back a bandage on his shoulder, expecting to see the same old healed gash he's carried as long as you've known him. Instead, the skin is split again along the old line, as if time has been reversed in that one place. "Golden age, my arse," he mutters, rewrapping it, and for once there's no humor in his voice at all.
the so-called age of glory, is rotting from the inside out. Bruises bloom from nothing. Men wake up with dark patches on their arms, legs, ribs, spreading like spilled ink under the skin. A hand clapped to a shoulder leaves a mark that doesn't fade. Kneeling hard on a deck plank prints your own bones onto your skin in purple and yellow. You watch a pirate bump his hip lightly against a rail and earn a bruise that looks like he's been clubbed.
Everyone moves more carefully now, not out of caution, but out of self-defense against their own bodies. The tiredness deepens. It's not just weariness from long watches and hard work. It's something hollowing you out from the inside. Climbing the rigging feels like hauling your own corpse up after you. Carrying a coil of rope leaves you breathless. Men lean on the rails between tasks, chests heaving, not because the work was so hard, but because they have nothing left to give to it.
Even the loud ones grow quiet. Songs die off. Jokes trail away halfway through. Laughter, when it comes, sounds thin, like it doesn't have the strength to fully form. Men sit together, not talking, not looking at each other's mouths. There are more naps in odd corners, not chosen naps, but the kind where someone sits down for a moment and just doesn't get back up for a while.
Gristle knows exactly what's happening. He doesn't have a fancy name for it, no book-learning words, but he's seen this before. He pokes your gums with a thick finger, nods once, and pulls away before you can bite him by reflex. Rot from the inside, he says. Too long without the right greens. Body forgets how to hold itself together.
You ask what he can do. He looks at you like you've asked him to turn the sea to wine. I can cut, he says. I can burn. I can pull things out of you that don't belong. But I can't stitch what isn't there. You want this to stop, you need fruit, greens, things that don't come in barrels. He gestures vaguely toward the endless horizon. Find land. Pray there's something on it we can chew that isn't salted to death. Until then, don't lose too many teeth. You start paying attention to the rare exceptions. A few of the older hands hoard things from shore leave, a scrap of dried citrus peel tucked into a pouch, a shriveled bit of something they swear was once a lime. One man has a small jar with what he clings as preserved lemon rind. You see him chew a sliver off it sometimes, face scrunching at the sourness, eyes closed like it's a prayer. When one of those men offers you a tiny scrap, a curl of something hard and brown that still, impossibly, smells faintly sharp, you take it like a sacrament. You press it to your tongue, and the sourness hits hard, a shock that makes your eyes water. Your gums burn, your whole mouth protests. For a moment, you feel more alive than you have in days. Then it's gone, swallowed, and you're left wanting more of something that doesn't exist on this ship. The worst cases start to drop out of the rotation. At first, they just work slower. Then they stop coming on deck at all. You see them lying below on the damp boards, eyes sunken, skin gone a strange yellow-gray. Their legs are mottled with bruises that look almost black. Some of them bleed from the nose in their sleep. Gristle does what he can, mostly rum and rapping and muttered curses, but he can't put back what the food has taken away. One morning, you help carry a man up onto the deck, not because he's recovered, but because he wants to see the sky one last time. His gums are a nightmare, swollen so far over his teeth you can barely see the white. When he smiles weakly at some crude joke, it's like looking into a skull padded with rotten meat. He watches the sunrise, says nothing, and is gone by nightfall. The sea gets him, as it gets everyone in the end. As days blur together, you feel yourself thinning out, not just in body, but in something deeper. Your gums are chewed velvet. Your teeth wiggle when the ship rolls. Old wounds itch and weep like they're remembering how to be fresh. This is the golden age they'll talk about in books someday, you think. Bright flags, bold captains, and underneath it all, a crew quietly rotting from the inside out. Scurvy's velvet grip doesn't crush, it unravels, and you can feel the first threads of yourself starting to come loose.
Punishment on a pirate ship is different from what you'd find in the Navy or on a merchant vessel. There's no captain with absolute authority to flog men at whim. The articles spell it out clearly. Justice is collective, decided by vote or by the quartermaster acting as judge. It's democracy of a sort, though a harsh one. The crew decides what counts as an offense, what the penalty should be, and whether mercy is warranted. You learn quickly that the mob's judgment can be more severe than any captain's.
The articles list the offenses: theft from the crew, desertion, cowardice in battle, striking another crew member, bringing a woman aboard without consent, hiding treasure from the common pot. Each violation has a suggested punishment, but the actual sentence depends on circumstances and the crew's mood. A man caught stealing food might get a dozen lashes. The same man caught stealing gold shares might be marooned. Context matters, but so does how well liked you are.
The most common punishment is the lash. The offender is tied to the mast or a grating, shirt stripped off, back exposed. The boatswain or another designated man administers the blows with a cat of nine tails, a whip with 9 knotted cords that tear skin with each strike. The crew watches. It's meant to be a deterrent, a public reminder of the cost of breaking rules. You watch a man take 10 lashes for fighting drunk. His back is raw meat by the end. He doesn't scream, which earns him respect, but he can barely move for days. Marooning is reserved for serious offenses: major theft, mutiny, murder of a crew member. The condemned man is put ashore on a deserted island or coastline with minimal supplies, sometimes a pistol with 1 shot, a bottle of water, maybe a bit of food. It's a slow death sentence. The sea surrounds him, and rescue is unlikely. You hear stories of marooned men going mad from isolation or using that single pistol bullet on themselves. It's considered more merciful than hanging, though you're not sure you agree. Moses' law is mentioned in some articles. 39 lashes, the maximum flogging. It's biblical in origin, 40 lashes minus 1, to avoid killing the man outright. You've never seen it administered, but older pirates speak of it with dread. A man who survives Moses' law is never the same. Scarred, broken, often infected. Most crews reserve it for the worst betrayals, the kind where they want the man to suffer before he's cast out or dies from his wounds. Walking the plank is mostly myth, at least on the Serpent's Grin. You've never seen it happen. If the crew wants someone dead, they're more direct about it. A blade, a bullet, or tossed overboard in the night. The elaborate ritual of a blindfolded man stepping off a plank seems like something from stories rather than practice. Though Rope mentions he's heard of it happening on other ships, usually as psychological torture before the actual execution. Keel hauling is another punishment you've heard about, but never witnessed. The victim is tied to a rope and dragged under the ship's keel from one side to the other. The barnacles on the hull act like razors, shredding skin. If you don't drown, you're cut to ribbons. Some crews in the Navy use it. Pirates rarely bother. It's complicated, requires rigging, and there are simpler ways to punish someone. But the threat of it exists, whispered about, adding to the catalog of horrors that keep men in line. Marooning supplies vary based on the offense's severity.
A man guilty of hoarding extra shares might get a week's water and some biscuit. A mutineer gets the pistol and nothing else. The crew debates these details before the sentence is carried out. You've sat through one such debate, men arguing whether to leave the condemned man a knife, whether a particular island had fresh water, whether mercy or example was more important. In the end, they voted for minimal supplies. The man's face as he was rowed to shore haunts you still.
The quartermaster acts as judge in most disputes. He hears both sides, consults the articles, and renders judgment. If it's serious enough, he brings it to a crew vote. You respect the process. It's fairer than you expected. But you also see how it can go wrong. Popular men get lighter sentences. Men who've made enemies suffer more. The appearance of justice doesn't always match the reality. It's still politics, just with different rules.
Dueling is allowed under the Articles, but strictly regulated. If two men have a grievance they can't resolve, they can challenge each other to single combat. It happens ashore, with the crew as witnesses, under agreed terms: pistols, swords, or fists. First blood, surrender, or death, depending on what's been agreed. You've seen one duel, pistols at 20 paces. Both men missed. They shook hands afterward, and the matter was considered settled. The ritual seemed to matter more than the outcome. Minor offenses get creative punishments. A man caught sleeping on watch might be forced to stay awake for 2 days straight, with crew checking on him. A drunk who starts a fight might have his rum ration cut for a week. Someone who shirks work gets assigned the worst tasks: scrubbing the bilge, cleaning the heads, work that's disgusting and exhausting. These aren't in the Articles, but they're understood. The crew enforces standards informally as much as formally. Repeat offenders face escalating consequences. First offense might be a warning or minor punishment. Second gets lashes. Third might be marooning or expulsion from the crew at the next port. Nobody wants a chronic troublemaker on a ship where trust is essential. You learn to keep your head down, follow the rules, and handle your problems quietly. It's not worth testing the crew's patience. Mutiny is the ultimate crime. If a group tries to overthrow the captain or seize the ship and fails, the punishment is death. No debate, no mercy. Successful mutiny is different, though. If the crew votes to remove the captain, that's legal under the Articles. The distinction matters. Mutiny is unauthorized rebellion. A vote of no confidence is democracy in action. You see the tension this creates. Captains must lead well or risk removal, but challengers must be sure they have the votes or they'll hang.
Theft from the common store is treated more seriously than you'd expect. In port, stealing is almost expected. Take what you can from outsiders. But stealing from your own crew? That's betrayal. It undermines the entire system of shared risk and reward. A man caught stealing from the hold is brought before the crew in irons. The vote is nearly unanimous. 24 lashes and marooning at the next landfall. His screams during the lashing make you flinch. The silence as he's rowed away is worse.
Cowardice in battle is hard to prove, but severely punished when it's clear. A man who hides during a fight, who runs when he should stand, faces the crew's contempt and formal punishment. You've heard of men receiving the lash for cowardice, or being denied their share of the prize. Worse than the physical punishment is the loss of respect. A coward can't function on a pirate ship. Even if he avoids formal punishment, the crew will make his life unbearable until he leaves.
Women aboard ship complicate everything. The Articles often forbid it. Too much potential for jealousy, fighting, distraction. When a woman is brought aboard anyway, it's supposed to be by crew vote. You've seen one case where a man smuggled his lover onto the ship. When she was discovered, the crew debated for hours. Eventually, they voted to put them both ashore at the next port with a small share. Not cruel, but firm.
The rules exist for reasons, and exceptions are rare. Murder of a crew member's the one crime that's always capital. Kill a man in battle? That's duty. Kill a man in a fair duel? That's honorable. Kill a man in his sleep or in a cowardly ambush? That's murder. The penalty is death, usually carried out immediately. You've never witnessed a murder aboard, but you've heard the stories. The murderer is either hanged from the yardarm or weighted and thrown overboard. No ceremony, no appeals. Swift justice. The captain isn't exempt from punishment. If he violates the articles or abuses his position, the crew can vote to remove or punish him. You've heard of captains flogged by their own crew, or stripped of rank and put ashore. It's rare. Most captains are smart enough to walk the line between authority and democracy. But the possibility keeps them honest. Power flows from the crew's consent, not from rank alone. Discipline maintains order, but it's a delicate balance. Too harsh and the crew rebels. Too lenient and chaos takes over. The captain and quartermaster navigate this constantly, deciding when to enforce rules strictly and when to look the other way. You see them let minor infractions slide when morale is low, but crack down hard when discipline starts slipping. It's a kind of leadership you didn't expect to find among outlaws. You realize the articles aren't just rules, they're the foundation of a functioning society in miniature. Without them, the ship would tear itself apart through violence and mistrust. With them, you have structure, fairness, shared purpose. The punishments seem brutal, but they're agreed upon, predictable, applied mostly equally. It's rough justice, but it's justice. In a world where you're outside the law, you create your own, and you follow it because the alternative is worse. You learn about the flag before you ever really see it. You've seen bits of black cloth up in the rigging, glimpsed skulls and bones daubed in white, but always from odd angles, half-furled, whipping in the wind, never fully clear. The older hands talk about it the way churchmen talk about icons, with a mix of reverence and fear. They don't call it the Jolly Roger. They call it the Colors or Old Roger, like it's a person or a promise. Out here, that flag is more than fabric. It's a confession. On some ships, flags are decoration, bright patches of color fluttering politely. On a pirate ship, the flag is a weapon. Black cloth, white bones, sometimes red hearts or dripping drops of paint. It's all deliberate, all chosen. You start to realize that long before a cannon fires or a boarding hook flies, the real first shot is visual. Once that black flag goes up, fear does half the work. You get your first close look at it on a day when the sea is deceptively calm. The captain calls for the colors to be hoisted. A scruffy flag is brought out from a chest, folded with more care than anything else on the ship. Unfurled, it's simple at a glance. Black field, white skull, and crossed bones beneath. The skull grins in a way that isn't friendly. It's not a joke, it's an announcement. We are death. We are here. Skull and crossbones, Rope explains when he catches you staring. So there's no misunderstanding. Means death, means danger, means we're not here to trade recipes. He gives a humorless half smile. Merchants see that. They know exactly who they're dealing with. Or they should, if they've any sense. But the Serpent's grin doesn't just have one flag. There's another rolled up beneath the first, reserved for special occasions. When they unfold that one, you see more than bones. A white skeleton, thin and elongated, dances on the black cloth. In one bony hand it holds an hourglass, in the other a spear, pointing toward a heart. The heart drips 3 painted drops. Even from a distance, It looks like it's bleeding. That one's the real face, one of the gunners tells you quietly. Skeleton is death, right? Hourglass says your time's running out. Spear and the bleeding heart mean if you're fool enough to fight, we don't stop till every last one of you's done. He shrugs. We're monsters, and we're proud of it. Best to warn a man proper. You start hearing more about flag language. Black, they say, means there's still a chance. Surrender fast, don't make trouble, and you might live. Red is different. Some crews carry a plain red flag, others one with a skull or a bleeding heart. When the red flies, it means no quarter, no mercy. We're coming, and we're not taking prisoners. When the old ones talk about red, they don't smile. On this ship, the black flag is the usual face presented to the world. It's not mercy, it's business. The logic is brutal but simple. If merchant crews learn that surrender under the black buys them a chance to live, they're more likely to give up without a fight. Less blood, fewer injuries, more usable plunder. Terror, but organized terror. The flag says very clearly, don't make this worse than it has to be. The first time you see the ritual of it, the ship ahead is just a fat merchant, sails full, unaware. At first, the Serpent's Grin runs up something harmless in the rigging, an ordinary trader's colors, even a naval flag they've stolen from somewhere. The distance closes. The other ship doesn't run. Why would it? To them, you're just another traveler in a crowded sea. Then, at shouting range, everything changes. "Run up, Old Roger!" the captain bellows. The false flag drops. The black flag rises. At the same moment, a warning shot booms from one of the bow guns. Not aimed to hit, just a shock. The sound rips through the calm air like a slap. On the other ship, you see men freeze. Hands go slack. One drops a coil of rope. They've just realized who you really are. You can almost feel the fear jump across the water. Men on the merchant deck are pointing, shouting, flailing for orders. Some look back toward their own colors, waiting for the word to strike them, the universal sign of surrender. Others stare at your flag, small but unmistakable, that grinning skull and its crossed bones like eyes on a snake. That's the trick, Rope says beside you. You hoist the black early enough. Sometimes they give up right there. No holes in their hull, no holes in ours. They get to keep their lives, we get to keep more of the cargo in one piece. Costs less in powder, less in blood. Flag does the work if it's scary enough and your reputation's loud enough. Reputation and symbols go together. The more brutal a crew is when someone resists, the more useful their flag becomes the next time. You hear stories. Ships taken where the pirates left just 1 or 2 men alive specifically so they could limp back to port and talk. About the black flag, about the red one, about what happened to those who tried to fight. Survivors become walking advertisements for terror. The next crew that sees that same flag will remember the story and think very hard about whether they really want to test it. Some captains design flags like personal signatures, the skeleton with an hourglass and spear, a man with a sword standing on a pair of skulls, a black field with a single bleeding heart. Each design means something specific. Time is running out. Death is near. No quarter. It's like they've taken all the things sailors already fear, drowning, bleeding, the end of their allotted days, and stitched them into one picture. You begin to see the strategy behind every stroke of paint. The hourglass isn't just a symbol, it's a countdown. It says, you have seconds to decide. The skeleton isn't just death, it's death that chose to walk beside these men. The heart isn't just a heart, it's your heart, and those drops of paint are imagining what your blood will look like on the deck if you choose wrong. Some nights, when the air is still and the ship is quiet, you find yourself looking up at the furled flag hanging limp from the yardarm. In the dark, the skull's grin looks wider. The bones seem to stretch. The cloth moves with the breath of the wind, like it's alive. You understand, in a way you didn't before, why sailors say they'd rather see storm clouds than that bit of black on the horizon. Beneath all of it is a truth that feels uglier the longer you live with it. The flag doesn't say we are noble outlaws or we are free men. It says we are monsters and we make no apology. Flying it is a kind of confession. We rob, we kill, we terrorize. We know exactly what we are. We will even advertise it before we come for you. You remember the first time you were pressed aboard, how being a pirate happened to you. The flag feels different from that. The flag is what the crew chooses. They hoist it themselves, knowing exactly what it means. Every time it rises, they renew that choice. Whatever excuses they tell themselves when the rum is flowing about bad captains, unfair wages, cruel navies, the flag cuts through all of it. You can't claim to be misunderstood when you sail under a skeleton stabbing a bleeding heart. And yet there's a twisted sense of honesty in it you can't quite deny. Merchant captains fly pretty colors and still run men into storms or starve them on short rations to save money. Navies fly proud standards while hanging deserters for trying to live. Pirates fly a skull and tell you straight, if you don't surrender, you may die. There's no pretense, no disguise once the black goes up. The hypocrisy falls away, leaving only the brutality everyone else hides behind nicer cloth.
One afternoon, as another distant speck on the horizon grows slowly larger, you watch the crew move almost lazily to their stations. The false flag is ready. The guns are primed. The black flag waits, furled and patient, its skull and skeleton and bleeding heart hidden for now. You realize that for all its drama, the Jolly Roger is less a costume and more a mirror held up to the ship. When it snaps open in the wind, it doesn't just show the world what's coming, it shows you what you've become.
Boarding, you had been told once, was the glamorous part. The stories in ports always lingered on that moment. Brave men leaping from rail to rail, blades flashing, enemies falling in neat, dramatic duels. Out here, when the grappling hooks bite and the two hulls slam together, you discover the truth. There is nothing elegant about it. It feels like two drunk animals trying to crush each other. Wood grinding on wood, rigging tangling like spider webs. The air fills with splinters, shouts, and the high panicked noises people make when they realize they might die in the next few seconds. The first time you go over the rail in a boarding action, it doesn't feel like a heroic leap. It feels like falling. Your hands scrabble for purchase on unfamiliar wood, boots slipping on spilled water, and something slicker you don't want to name. Men are pouring over beside you, shouting, cursing, some already swinging weapons wildly. The gap between ships is a churning slit of sea, dark and hungry. You don't look down. You don't have time to. The smell hits you before the enemy does. Sweat, smoke, fear, and powder. Someone has fired too early, and gun smoke crawls through the air like fog. You can barely see more than a few paces ahead. Shapes crash into you, and you into them. Everyone shouting, no one listening. For a moment you can't tell who's pirate and who's merchant. Everyone is just a shape, an obstacle, a threat.
Weapons in this mess aren't elegant either. This isn't fencing in a gentleman's yard. It's whatever you can hold and swing. Men brandished rusted cutlasses, boarding axes with nicked blades, long knives meant for gutting fish, belaying pins, even hammers snatched from the carpenter's kit. Pistols have fired once and then become clubs, heavy and blunt in desperate hands. You see one man wielding what looks like a meat cleaver, his face streaked with soot, mouth open in a wordless roar. You had thought, in some naive, buried part of your mind, that you might feel something during your first real fight. Fear, certainly, maybe a surge of savage joy. Instead, you feel confusion. There's too much happening all at once. A man lunges at you and you block without thinking, your arm jolting with the impact. Another figure slams into your side, sending you staggering into a third. You are jostled, shoved, spun. The battle feels less like a clash of warriors and more like being trapped in a stampede. When blades do find flesh, it's rarely clean. There are no perfectly timed thrusts into conveniently exposed hearts. There are wild swings that catch shoulders, backs, hands. Men go down not in graceful arcs, but in ugly collapses, legs tangled with ropes and each other. Someone behind you screams, a high, piercing sound that cuts through the general noise. You don't turn to look. You can't. The press of bodies won't let you. At some point, you end up on the deck with no memory of how you got there. You are on your knees, one hand on the planks, the other clutching your weapon. Around you is a tangle of limbs, arms and legs crossing, boots slipping, knees colliding. Someone falls on your back, using you as leverage to push himself up again. You're part of a pile now, a screaming, filthy pile of limbs and splinters and smoke, everyone clawing for leverage and space and breath. The sounds are the worst. The shouts of command, "To the guns! To the quarterdeck!" are swallowed by closer, smaller noises. Grunts as blows land, the thud of wood against bone, the clatter of dropped weapons skittering across the deck. A man nearby sobs as he tries to crawl away, then cuts off with a choked grunt. Somewhere, a voice prays in a language you don't recognize, words tumbling over each other in panicked rhythm. You see a man's eyes before you see what's happening to him. They're wide, almost comically so, white all around the irises. For a heartbeat, you lock gaze, two strangers connected in the middle of chaos. Then someone behind you swings, and his expression shifts from fear to blank surprise. He crumples out of sight. You don't see the wound. You just feel the change in the air where he was. Fear, when it finally punches properly through the fog, doesn't feel like you expect it. It's not a cold, cinematic dread. It's hot and messy, like something trying to crawl out of your chest. Your fingers go slick on your weapon's grip. Your mouth is dry despite the sweat running into it. You realize with a clarity that feels almost calm that all it would take is one bad step, one unseen blade, and you would vanish into this melee so completely that no one could say for certain where or when you fell. The merchants don't fight like trained soldiers. Most are just men with families and modest dreams who happen to be on the wrong ship in the wrong sea on the wrong day. They swing too wide, too high, panic making their movements wasteful. But panic also makes them dangerous. A wild blow is still a blow. A lucky strike still cuts. You see one merchant drive a broken spear shaft into a pirate's throat, purely by thrashing at arm's length. Training, such as you have, isn't about elegant moves in moments like this. It's about not freezing. You remember what Rope told you. Keep your feet under you. Keep your back to something solid if you can, and don't waste a swing. You cling to those rules like prayer. You edge sideways until you find a section of rail at your back. It's not safety exactly, but it means nothing can hit you from that direction except the sea. Somewhere above, beyond the smoke and shouts, you hear the captain's voice. Not clearly enough to make out words, just the tone, sharp, commanding, riding over the chaos. On both ships, figures on the quarterdecks are locked in their own grim dance, giving orders that try to shape the brawl into something like a plan. But down here, in the crush, plans feel far away. Down here, it's just you and the next blow. The deck itself becomes an enemy. It's slick with spilled water, oil, something darker. Your boots slide unexpectedly. You slam into a fallen body and nearly go down with it. Hands grab at your ankles, at your coat, at anything they can use to pull themselves up or pull you down. Nails dig into your leg through the cloth. You kick free, not knowing if you're saving yourself or hurting someone who might have already been dying. When the tide finally turns, you don't notice right away. The noise doesn't stop, it just changes. The shouts become more one-sided, more voices yelling in your crew's rough accents, fewer in the merchant's higher, panicked tones. The pile of struggling bodies shifts to a pile of groaning, then mostly still bodies. You find yourself standing without remembering when you got up, chest heaving, ears ringing. Around you are the remnants of the fight. Weapons lie scattered. A pistol with its barrel dented from being used as a club. An axe buried half deep in a shattered crate. A knife snapped clean at the hilt. Men lean against the rail or slump against masts, faces smeared with soot and sweat, some with blood that may or may not be their own. The smell of powder hangs heavy, clinging to your clothes, your hair, the back of your throat. The merchants who are still alive are gathered together, hands on their heads or bound behind their backs. Their eyes flick constantly between your flag, your captain, and the bodies on the deck. You see in them the mirror of something you'd rather not look at, the realization that whatever they thought piracy was, the reality is cruder, louder, uglier. They're not thinking about treasure or adventure. They're thinking about how close they came to being just another still shape on these planks. You look down at yourself and take inventory. A tear in your sleeve, a bruise already darkening on your ribs where someone's elbow or boot found you in the crush, a shallow cut on your forearm you don't remember getting. It could have been worse. For some men, it is. Later, when the adrenaline drains away and the plunder is being sorted, you replay fragments in your mind. Not the whole battle, never the whole thing. Your memory won't hold it that neatly. Just flashes. The look in the eyes of the man who fell, the sound of your own breath in your ears, the way your hand shook when you tightened your grip on the weapon. You realize boarding isn't a grand duel at all. It's a series of bad, fast choices made in a space too small for the number of bodies inside it. When you hear men in port boast about boarding actions now, you'll know what they're leaving out. They won't talk about the screams, the slipping, the blind swinging of blades. They won't mention the smell. They'll make it sound clean, almost honorable. You know better. Boarding is a screaming, filthy pile of limbs, smoke, blood, and bad decisions. And the worst part is knowing that, pressed into this life or not,
You were one of the limbs in that pile.
Treasure, you'd always been told, meant chests. Heavy wooden boxes overflowing with gold coins, jewels spilling in bright, impossible colors, glittering crowns balanced on piles of doubloons. That was the picture painted in tavern stories and cheap broadsides. So when you finally stand on the deck of a captured West Indian man, panting after the fight, and see what the pirates are so excited about, it feels like a bad joke. No chests, no glitter, just rows and rows of barrels and crates. The quartermaster moves through it all like a man inspecting a garden instead of a cargo hold. He knocks on casks, listens to the tone, peels back corners of canvas, cracks lids with a practiced twist of his knife. "Sugar," he calls out, tapping one stack of barrels. "Molasses here. Tobacco in those hogsheads. Cotton bales aft." His voice holds satisfaction, not disappointment. To you, it looks like someone robbed a warehouse by mistake. The smell in the hold is thick and strange. Sweetness from the sugar mingles with the sour, heavy scent of molasses. Tobacco adds a dry, bitter edge. Cotton has its own dusty, fibrous smell. It's not unpleasant exactly, just overwhelming. You breathe it in and realize this is the scent of someone else's wealth. Not shiny coins, but commodities, the things that build mansions far away from the men who actually touched them.
"Where's the gold?" one of the newer pirates asks, voicing the question that's been coiled in your throat. The veterans laugh, not kindly. "You're looking at it," someone says, slapping a hand against a barrel that thuds solidly. "This is the gold, lad, white gold." He scoops a pinch of spilled sugar from a cracked seam and lets it run through his fingers like sand. Britain kills and dies for this. Men get rich off this who never smelled a ship in their lives.
Sugar. You'd heard the term white gold before, tossed around in portside talk about plantations and king's ransoms. But it hits different seeing it like this, anonymous and bland in its containers. No sparkle, no drama. Just tons and tons of rough crystals, sticky where moisture has gotten in, clumping together. Enough, you're told, to sweeten the tea of thousands of people who will never think about the hands that loaded it or the blood spilled to steal it. The quartermaster notes everything down with rough, deliberate strokes in a ledger. So many barrels of sugar, so many of molasses, so many bales of cotton, so many hogsheads of tobacco. Each line is a promise for future coin, somewhere on some distant shore, where smugglers and crooked merchants will turn this floating warehouse into money. You watch him work and realize that on this ship, ink and numbers matter almost as much as blades. Molasses, you learn, is more than just sticky brown syrup leaking from a cracked seam. In the Caribbean web of trade, it's part of a machine. Molasses can be turned into rum, and rum can be turned into coin, and coin can be turned into more ships, more guns, more men. Barrels creak in their hoops, exuding a sweet, alcoholic tang. The pirates treat them with the same rough care they give everything else. Rough, but not careless. This is future drink, future profit. Tobacco bales sit heavy and compact, wrapped in cloth and rope. Some pirates cut small samples free and tuck them away immediately, personal bonuses. Tobacco smoke already curls from pipes lit in quiet corners of the deck, the smell familiar and comforting in a way the sugar's sweetness isn't. Cotton bales, by contrast, draw less immediate interest, but the quartermaster smiles at them too. Manufactured into cloth far away, they'll clothe people who never once worried about being pressed into piracy. Standing among the cargo, you feel an odd sense of anticlimax.
You risked your life for this? For barrels and bales and sacks? You remember the boarding, the screams, the chaos, the flashes of steel. You remember the moment you thought you might die on that unfamiliar deck. Now, surrounded by raw trade goods, the entire thing feels both smaller and more enormous. Smaller because there's no gleaming treasure to point at. More.
Rope finds you staring at a stack of sugar casks like they've insulted your mother. Not what you pictured? He asks. You admit it's not. He snorts. Coins are easy to count and easy to chase, but they don't move the same way this does. This stuff, he gestures at the cargo, is what keeps plantations running, cities eating, rich men richer. We're not stealing toys here. We're interrupting the bloodstream.
The phrase sticks with you, interrupting the bloodstream. You imagine lines across a map, all these goods flowing from Caribbean islands to Europe and back, to colonies and home ports, to counting houses and drawing rooms. The Serpent's Grin is just a parasite on that system, biting in when it can, taking a mouthful, then slipping away. But to the men who own these goods on paper, this is robbery on a scale that stings. On deck, when the plunder is divided in talk, if not yet in coin, the reactions are muted. No one cheers for sugar. There are no shouted toasts to molasses. Instead, you hear practical questions. How much will this fetch in Tortuga? Who's buying in Port Royal these days? Can the governor's man be bribed to look the other way if some of this accidentally finds its way ashore under a false flag? The conversation is less pirate fantasy, more crooked business meeting. You start to understand why shore leave in certain ports is so vital. Places like Port Royal or Tortuga aren't just dens of drunkenness and sin. They're marketplaces for stolen goods. There, barrels like these will be unloaded quietly at night, rolled across sand or into hidden coves, and traded to men who make their living greasing the edges of law. They'll buy this white gold at a fraction of its worth and sell it on as if it came straight from some honest merchant.
The disappointment among the greener pirates doesn't last long. Coin is coin, whether it comes from a chest of silver or from selling someone else's sugar. But you notice a difference in the way they talk about this raid compared to how they talk about rumored ones. When they tell stories, they'll leave out the part where the treasure was crates of cotton and barrels of sticky brown syrup. They'll skip ahead to the part where the money jingles in their pockets on shore.
Loading some of the prize onto the Serpent's Grin for transfer, things they can't or won't leave on the captured ship, turns the deck into a temporary dockyard. Men grunt and strain, rolling casks, shifting bales, stacking crates. Sugar dust clings to sweaty skin, turning arms and faces faintly sticky and white. One man jokes that it's like working in a bakery from hell. No one laughs very hard, but the image is hard to shake. You get a closer look at the sugar as a cask cracks slightly, spilling some of its contents. The crystals are rough, not the neat, pretty granules sold in small packets on land. They clump together, some darker, some lighter, flecked with tiny bits of cane and dirt. You pinch a bit between your fingers and taste it. It's sweet, of course, intensely so. It feels wrong somehow to be tasting a luxury your own life will never really afford in civilized portions. As the work continues, sweat and sugar mix on your skin, leaving a thin, gritty coating. It clings to your clothes, your hair, even your eyelashes when the wind kicks it up. White gold, eh? Someone mutters, wiping his brow and leaving a streak of brown-gray muck. Feels more like flour sticking to dough. The comment makes you think of all the delicate pastries this cargo might become, somewhere far away, eaten by hands that have never known rope burns. Tobacco leaves crumble slightly when handled, releasing a rich, earthy smell.
Some pirates tuck loose bits into their pipes immediately, burning stolen goods literally to smoke. Perks of the trade, one says, exhaling a thin stream of blue. Cotton bales, when nicked, show soft white fibers inside, a stark contrast to the splintered, stained deck. You imagine those fibers turned into fine shirts worn by men who would cross the street to avoid brushing against someone like you. When the prize is finally inventoried, secured, and ready for whatever black market path awaits it, the captain addresses the crew. He doesn't talk about glory, he talks about shares, about how much a cargo like this can fetch if the right buyer is found, how that divides among men, how this haul means maybe, just maybe, there'll be enough to keep everyone fed and drunk and relatively satisfied until the next ship. It's not the speech a storybook pirate would give. It's the speech a tired, practical criminal gives to other tired, practical criminals. That night, lying on your damp boards below deck, you think about the phrase pirate treasure. You've seen it now, and it doesn't shine. It comes in barrels and bales, in sticky leaks and dusty stacks. It smells like sugar and sweat and dried leaves. It's heavy and dull and stubborn. But it's what men are killing each other over out here in the Caribbean. This white gold that will melt into teacups and desserts, invisible by the time it reaches the mouths of the people who paid for it. Treasure, you realize, isn't always coins you can stack in your hand. Sometimes it's just the stuff that keeps other people's worlds running, and you're out here risking your neck for the crumbs shaken loose in transit. Shore leave doesn't feel real until you smell land. After weeks of nothing but salt and rot and the sour stench of men, the first hint of earth on the wind is almost dizzying. It creeps in slowly at first, damped soil, distant greenery, smoke from cooking fires, and then all at once as the ship glides closer to the harbor. Ahead, clustered along the edge of a bay, is the crooked little town that eats pirate wages like a hungry mouth, Port Royal or Tortuga, or some other nest of vice with a different name and the same soul. From a distance, it could almost pass for any colonial port. A line of low buildings, wooden piers jutting into the water, masts bristling in the harbor. But as you get closer, the differences appear. The taverns are too many, crowded together like barnacles. The streets are too narrow, too loud. Music spills from open doorways. Fiddles, rough singing, the clatter of dice on wood. This isn't a place for polite trade. This is a place that exists to catch whatever falls from the pockets of men like your captain. The Serpent's Grin drops anchor among a forest of other ships. Some are honest enough on paper, with proper flags and tidy decks. Others, like yours, show their true nature in small details, patched sails, extra gun ports, crews that lean on the rails watching shore with the hungry look of men about to be let off a leash. Longboats are lowered, orders are shouted, shore parties are picked. Your name is called, and your pulse jumps. Land. The pier rises up to meet you as the boat scrapes alongside. The boards feel wrong under your boots at first, solid, unmoving, not shifting with each breath of the sea. You step onto the dock and your legs briefly try to compensate for a roll that isn't there, making you stumble like a drunk before you've had a drop. Around you, other pirates laugh, curse, or grab each other's shoulders, relearning how to stand on something that doesn't sway. The smell of the town hits you fully on the walk in. Wood smoke from cooking fires, roast meat, some of it identifiable, some less so. The sharp, sweet bite of spilled rum and cheap wine.
Human smells, too. Perfume and sweat, unwashed bodies, and whatever passes for laundry day. Compared to the ship, it's a carnival for your nose, chaotic and overwhelming. The streets are dirt and broken stone, puddled where waste and rain meet. Chickens and dogs roam freely, as comfortable here as the humans. The first thing you notice about the people is that no one looks entirely respectable. Even those in better coats or finer dresses carry themselves with a certain looseness, a casual familiarity with danger. Tavern owners stand in doorways, assessing each landing boat like a butcher eyeing new cuts of meat. Women and men of the night call out offers from shaded porches and open windows, their clothes bright against the weathered wood. Street gamblers crouch over makeshift tables, cards and dice flashing in their hands. The captain has his own business, meetings with buyers, discreet visits to certain respectable-looking houses that definitely aren't respectable on the inside. The crew, released in groups with warnings about starting more trouble than they can finish, fan out like spilled water. You find yourself drawn toward one of the many taverns lining the main street, its sign creaking overhead, the Drunken Gull, or something equally uninspired and honest. Inside, the tavern is dim and loud. The air is thick with pipe smoke and the sour, sweet smell of rum. Wooden tables crowd the room, some filled with laughing pirates, others with men who might be merchants, smugglers, or something in between. A fiddler saws at his instrument in a corner, occasionally drowned out by shouts and laughter. Serving girls and boys weave through the chaos with practiced ease, trays balanced on one hand, free fingers ready to swat at wandering hands if necessary. You wedge yourself into a space at a crowded table, a mug of rough rum, more fire than flavor, pushed into your hand before you've even settled. The first swallow burns all the way down, startling your body with something that isn't brine or stew. It hits your empty stomach like a cannonball. Around you, coins clink, dice rattle, arguments flare and die in the space of a breath. It feels like the ship's chaos set to a different rhythm. Gambling sprouts on every flat surface. Dice games next to card games, next to improvised contests of strength and luck. You watch a pirate lose a week's share in 3 throws of the bones, then win it back on the next roll and immediately stake it again. Money changes hands so fast it's almost abstract. These men will go back to sea broke and hungry, but in this moment, the possibility of doubling their coin is more real than tomorrow's hunger. You tell yourself you'll just watch. Then someone shoves a few coins toward you, daring you to test your luck. The rum hums in your veins. The room feels slightly softer at the edges. You sit down at a dice game, run by a man with a face like old leather. The rules are simple enough. The odds are definitely not in your favor. You play anyway. At some point in the blur of rolls and curses, you realize you've made it down to your last bit of coin. One more throw, the dice clattering across the stained wood, and it's gone. You stare at the empty space where your modest winnings used to be and feel an odd, hollow amusement rather than shock. You've risked your life for barrels of sugar and bales of cotton, and here you are, losing your share to polished bits of bone on a sticky table. You don't walk away entirely empty-handed. You leave behind a few coins, but retain the essentials: your boots, your belt, your knife. Mostly. The exception is one boot, lost in a particularly foolish side bet you were sure you'd win. Now your left foot wears cracked leather, and your right foot wears a rag wrapped hastily around sock. The tavern floor is uneven and occasionally wet. You tell yourself you'll win the boot back later. You won't. Outside, the streets of Port Royal, or Tortuga, or wherever you've made landfall, are alive with a different kind of tide. Pirates stagger from doorways singing off-key. Laughter spills from open windows. In an alley, someone retches. Two men argue loudly over a perceived slight in a card game, only to burst into rough laughter when one trips and lands in a puddle. The town is crooked in every sense, its buildings, its streets, its morals. There's ugliness here, too. You see it in the shadows, figures slumped against walls, too drunk or too sick to move. A child darting between legs to snatch at dropped coins or unattended bottles. A woman sitting on a stoop, face blank, staring past the revelry, like she's already used up her share of feeling. Shore leave is freedom for some, and a trap for others, the town feeding on anyone who steps wrong. For all its vice, there are moments of small, strange beauty. A lantern swinging over a doorway, casting warm light on faces flushed with drink and relief. A fragment of surprisingly sweet song rising above the din as someone with a good voice forgets themselves for a verse. The smell of grilled fish from a street vendor's stall, mixing with spices you haven't tasted since your last time on land. These things remind you, briefly, that the world is capable of more than rot and rope burns. As the night deepens, the edges of everything blur. Rum bends the light, turns sharp corners into soft ones. The streets grow shinier as spilled drinks and other liquids soak into the dirt. Your missing boot becomes a joke you repeat more times than it deserves. You dance once, badly, with someone whose name you never catch. You laugh more in a few hours than you have in weeks, the sound feeling rusty but genuine. Inevitably, there are fights. Not full brawls. Those the tavern keepers shut down fast, knowing too much damage is bad for business. But quick flashes of fists, a shove here, a thrown mug there. The pirate code may forbid striking another aboard ship, but on land those rules loosen. Still, most men are too tired, too intent on drink and distraction to truly tear into each other. They know they'll need those same shoulders at the oars tomorrow. Eventually, the recall comes, not a trumpet or a bell, just a feeling that moves through the taverns and alleys, word passed from mouth to mouth that the boats will be leaving soon, that any man not back aboard when the tide turns will be left to his luck ashore. Some pirates drag their feet, others hurry, suddenly sober at the thought of being stranded. You find your way back to the dock with the crowd, one boot thudding, one wrapped foot silent. As you climb back into the longboat, stomach sloshing with cheap rum and head buzzing, you look back at the crooked town. Its lights blur slightly in your vision, winking like a cluster of tired stars along the shore. The streets already seem to be swallowing the night's stories, pulling them down into themselves to be retold, exaggerated or forgotten. Shore leave is over. The sea waits. You sit, feeling the wood of the boat under you, and realize that for all its filth and danger and noise, that crooked little port is the closest thing men like you have to a home on land. And you've just left a boot and a handful of hard-earned coins on its floor as an offering. Women at sea are rare, but not as rare as the stories suggest. The popular image is all man, rough, bearded, violent. And mostly that's true. But you've seen women on pirate ships, heard stories of others, met a few in ports who've lived this life longer than you have. They're here for the same reasons as the men: escape, opportunity, freedom from a world that offered them nothing.
The difference is they had to fight twice as hard to get here, and 3 times as hard to stay.
Some women disguise themselves as men. It's easier that way. Bind your chest, cut your hair, adopt a man's name and mannerisms. On a ship where privacy barely exists, it takes skill to maintain the deception. You've heard whispers about crew members whose voices seem too high, whose faces too smooth. But nobody asks questions if they pull their weight. The work matters more than what's underneath the clothes.
Anne Bonny's name comes up in taverns and on deck. She's real, sailed with Calico Jack Rackham, fought as fiercely as any man, wore men's clothes in battle, but made no secret of being a woman. The stories about her are wild, probably exaggerated, but there's truth underneath. She proved a woman could stand on deck with a cutlass and pistol and be just as dangerous as anyone else. Her legend gives other women cover, makes their presence slightly less shocking.
Mary Read is the other name you hear constantly. Disguised as a man for years, served in the military, ended up on a pirate ship, and kept the secret until she didn't need to anymore. The stories say she killed a man in a duel to protect a lover, that she was fierce and skilled and fearless. Whether every detail is true doesn't matter. The fact that people believe it means women pirates are real enough to become myths. The articles on most ships address women specifically. Some crews forbid them entirely. Too much risk of jealousy, fighting, complications. Others allow women if the crew votes to accept them, same as any new member. A few ships don't care at all, treating gender as irrelevant if you can do the work. The Serpent's Grin falls somewhere in the middle. Women aren't common, but they're not forbidden. The real barrier is convincing the crew you're worth the potential trouble. You meet a woman at port who sails on a sloop that works the same waters. She's dressed practically, shirt, breeches, boots, a knife at her belt. She doesn't hide being a woman, but she doesn't advertise it either. Over drinks, she tells you her story. Ran from a marriage she didn't choose, stowed away on a merchant ship, got caught, ended up on a pirate crew when they captured the vessel. Been at sea 3 years. Harder than staying on land, she says, but I'd rather die free than live in a cage. Pregnancy is a complication no one wants to deal with. A pregnant woman can't do heavy work, can't fight, becomes a liability in a world with no margin for weakness. Most women at sea take measures to prevent it. Herbs, timing, or simply avoiding men altogether. You've heard stories of women who got pregnant anyway and either left the ship voluntarily or were put ashore at the next port with a share. It's not cruelty, it's practicality. A ship is no place for a child.
Combat doesn't differentiate. When boarding actions happen, the women fight alongside the men. You've witnessed it once. A woman with a cutlass moving through the chaos with the same desperate efficiency as everyone else. She took a cut to her arm, kept fighting, helped secure the prize. Afterward, her share was calculated the same as any other crew member. Blood and risk are the currency here, not gender.
Respect is earned the same way for everyone. Competence, courage, pulling your weight. A woman who can tie knots, handle sails, navigate, fight, she's valued. A woman who can't is a burden, same as a man who can't. The crew doesn't have patience for dead weight, regardless of who you are. This creates a kind of equality, harsh and functional. There's no chivalry, no special treatment, just results. Sexual dynamics complicate things. Men outnumber women heavily, and proximity breeds tension. Some women form relationships with crew members, partnerships that provide protection and companionship. Others stay determinedly alone, making it clear they're not available and backing it up with a reputation for violence if necessary. The smart ones establish boundaries early and enforce them consistently.
The articles on some ships specifically prohibit forcing yourself on a woman crew member with severe punishment, marooning or death. It's partly about protecting women, but also about preventing the chaos that sexual violence would create. A crew that turns on itself over assault falls apart. The rules exist to preserve order as much as to protect individuals. You're glad the rules exist, even if the reasoning is pragmatic rather than moral. Leadership roles are technically open to women under most articles. Captain, quartermaster, navigator, all elected or appointed based on skill. In practice, you've never heard of a woman captain on a pirate ship, though you've heard of women quartermasters and navigators. The barrier is partly prejudice, partly the fact that so few women are at sea to begin with. But the possibility exists, written into the democratic structure of pirate governance. You ask Rope what he thinks about women pirates. He shrugs. Same as men pirates. Some are good at it, some aren't. Some I'd trust to watch my back, some I wouldn't. He pauses. Seen a woman take down a man twice her size in a fight once, fast and mean. Respect's not about what you are, it's about what you do. It's the most egalitarian philosophy you've heard on the subject, delivered with complete indifference. Port is where gender matters more. On land, women face different dangers: harassment, assault, assumptions about what they're willing to do for money. Women pirates move through port towns carefully, often in groups, armed and alert. The freedom of the ship doesn't extend to shore the same way. Society's rules reassert themselves on land, and women who've lived outside those rules are particularly vulnerable. Prostitution and piracy sometimes overlap. Some women in port towns work as prostitutes and gather intelligence for pirate crews, which ships are carrying valuable cargo, which captains are careless, when naval patrols are scheduled. It's a dangerous game, exchanging information for money or passage. A few transition from informant to crew member, trading one risky profession for another. The line between sex work and piracy is thinner than you'd expect, in places where both exist outside the law. Clothing is practical rather than performative. The women you've seen at sea dress for work: loose shirts, breeches or skirts that don't restrict movement, boots, hats to block the sun. In battle, some bind their chests flat and could pass for young men at a distance. Others don't bother. There's no uniform, no standard. You wear what works and what you can get. Fashion is irrelevant when you're hauling lines or fighting for your life. There's a woman on the Serpent's Grin. Has been since before you joined. She works the rigging. Quiet and competent. Keeps to herself mostly. You've exchanged maybe a dozen words with her in all the months you've been aboard. She doesn't stand out because she's made herself unremarkable. Does her job, doesn't cause trouble, blends into the crew. It's a survival strategy, you realize. The less attention you draw, the fewer problems you face. Stories of female pirate captains from other eras circulate. Qing Shi in China, commanding hundreds of ships. Grace O'Malley in Ireland, leading raids and negotiating with queens. These women are legends, so far removed from your experience they seem mythical, but their existence proves it's possible. Leadership, strategy, command, none of it requires being male, just opportunity, skill, and ruthlessness, the same qualities that make any pirate successful. You wonder sometimes what it's like for the women on board, the extra layer of caution, the constant awareness of being different, the knowledge that mistakes will be judged more harshly. They don't talk about it much, maybe because talking about it makes it more real, or because they're tired of explaining. They're here to work, to survive, to claim the same freedom the men claim. The fact that it's harder doesn't make it less worth pursuing. In the end, the sea doesn't care about gender. Storms kill indiscriminately.
Disease doesn't check what's between your legs before it strikes. A cannonball will take off anyone's head. The ocean is a great equalizer in that way. Everyone's equally vulnerable, equally mortal. On land, society builds walls and hierarchies. At sea, survival strips those away. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough that a woman with skill and determination can carve out a place. It's not fair, but it's more fair than most of the world offers.
You notice the ship change when the wind does, not just in the creak of the masts or the snap of canvas, but in the way the men look up together, all at once, as if sniffing for something only they can smell. They don't call it weather, they call it signs. A line of clouds that looks wrong, a sudden silence in the waves, a gull that circles once and vanishes. You grew up with land-bound omens, black cats, cracked mirrors, church bells tolling at odd hours. Out here, the sea has its own language, and every man around you seems fluent. Some of their rules you've heard before in passing. Never whistle on deck, they say, unless you're the cook. Whistling calls the wind, and not in a friendly way. It dares the storm to answer. Singing too loud can be suspect for the same reason. On calm days, when the sails hang like tired lungs, you'll sometimes hear a man breathe a tune through his teeth anyway, quietly, like he's bargaining with whatever listens out there. On rough days, the ship is as silent as a church in a thunderstorm.
There are rules about what you bring aboard. Bananas are bad luck, some insist. They spoil too fast, hide rot, and have a way of vanishing with the men who carry them. Umbrellas, oddly enough, are forbidden too. You don't invite rain to a voyage, Rope explains, or storms, or anything that looks like you're ready for trouble before it comes. A horseshoe nailed to the mast, though, that's good luck. A silver coin under it is better. You've seen both on the Serpent's Grin, small bits of land magic hammered into sea life.
Some omens swim. Dolphins pacing the bow are greeted with grins and pointing fingers. Good luck, they say, playful spirits that mean a safe run. Sharks are different. A shark that follows the ship for more than a day, keeping steady pace just out of reach, draws hard eyes and tightened jaws. That one's waiting, the older men mutter. Someone's not coming home. They don't say whose name is on the invisible list. They don't have to. You catch yourself counting your own breaths more carefully. Then there are the birds. Gulls are background noise, as much a part of the sea as the waves. But certain birds, the long-winged ones that ride the currents far from land, albatross or something like it, are treated with near religious caution. You leave those be, one sailor tells a new hand who's raising a sling. Birds like that carry souls. Kill one, it comes back for yours. It's not scientific, it's not even consistent, but the slingshot goes down all the same. Not all the rules are about animals. Some are about days. Fridays, in particular, make men twitchy. Starting a voyage on a Friday is frowned on so hard it might as well be forbidden. Bad luck to begin on the day they hanged the carpenter, someone says, meaning Christ, probably, but no one explains further. You watch as the captain delays departure once, fair wind, good tide, just to avoid crossing the harbor bar on that one cursed square on the calendar. Names, too, have power. There are storm names no one says unless they have to, old storms that took ships down in places the crew still sails. Neptune and his ilk are invoked cautiously, usually with a muttered apology attached, as if speaking too boldly about sea gods might draw their attention in the wrong way. Mermaids are the strangest case. Half the crew swears they've seen one, the other half spits and says talking about them invites them closer. You've seen enough faces in the waves, real or not, that you file that one under do not test.
Rope is your unofficial guide to this invisible map of do's and don'ts. He doesn't believe all of it, he claims, but he follows most of it anyway. Superstition's just rules we don't admit are rules. He tells you one slow afternoon, both of you sitting on a coil of rope by the rail. Out here, can't hurt to be polite. To the sea, to the wind, to whatever might be watching. You don't have to believe. You just don't spit in its eye. The line between joke and genuine fear is thin. You've watched men laugh about a bad omen and then quietly take steps to undo it, touching the mast 3 times, tossing a bit of bread into the water, muttering a rhyme under their breath. You hear the same little phrases over and over, half prayer, half spell. Red sky at morning, sailor take warning. Red sky at night, sailors to light. Rain before 7, fair by 11. None of it is guaranteed, but it gives the illusion of pattern in a place that mostly runs on chaos. Death at sea has its own rituals, tangled up with superstition and practicality both. When a man dies, there is no graveyard, no stone. Sometimes there's no body, lost overboard, taken by cannon, swallowed by fire. When there is, it's sewn into canvas with something heavy at the feet and slid into the water. The old line says you sew the last stitch through the nose to be sure he's truly gone. You don't actually see anyone do that on the Serpent's Grin, but you notice fingers hovering by noses all the same, as if checking. The moment a body goes over the side, every eye follows it down. Some men cross themselves. Others touch a charm at their neck or whisper a few words in a language you don't know. For a few minutes, the ship moves more carefully, as if afraid to jostle the fresh ghost clinging to it. Then someone spits in the water and says, "He's in the deep now. Mind the living." The work resumes. But for the rest of the day, laughter comes quieter, if it comes at all. Ghost stories multiply in this soil. Sailors talk about ships seen where no ship should be, full-rigged silhouettes in dead calm, lit as though by lanterns that never go out. They talk about dead crewmen spotted hauling lines in the corner of the eye, only to vanish when you turn. They talk about cold patches on a sun-baked deck, places where a man died that never quite warm up again, no matter how long the sun beats on them. The Flying Dutchman is the story you hear most, a ghost ship damned to sail forever, crewed by the dead. Different men tell it different ways. Sometimes it's a Dutch captain who defied God. Sometimes it's a Spanish treasure ship cursed by stolen gold. The details shift, but the core stays the same. If you see her on the horizon, glowing in mist or storm, someone aboard your ship is marked for death. You ask if anyone's actually seen her. The answer is always someone who isn't here anymore. Then there are the lights. On storm-racked nights, when lightning splits the sky and rain hammers the deck, men swear they've seen pale flames dancing along the mast tips and yard arms. They call it St. Elmo's fire, or corpse candles, or a dozen other names, depending on where they learned the sea. Some say it's the souls of drowned sailors come to warn you. Others say it's a blessing, proof that St. Elmo, patron of sailors, is watching. Either way, no one touches it. You don't grab fire that doesn't burn, even if it looks friendly. One night, you see it yourself. The storm is brutal, wind howling, waves tall enough to swallow the bow, rain so thick you can barely see the man next to you. Then, through the chaos, a pale blue glow blooms at the tip of the mainmast. It flickers, spreads, wraps the rigging in soft, ghostly light. The crew freezes. For a moment, the only sound is the wind and the sea. Someone whispers a prayer. Someone else breathes. Elmo's watching. You don't know if it's science or spirits, but standing there, drenched and exhausted, staring at fire that doesn't consume wood, you understand why men believe.
Not all omens are grand or terrifying. Some are small, domestic, stitched into daily life. Spill salt, and you throw a pinch over your left shoulder to blind the devil. An overturned bowl means an overturned boat, so bowls are always set down carefully. A bell that rings on its own is a death omen. You've heard that one enough times that when the ship's bell clangs softly one windless afternoon, just a single lonely note, the deck goes silent. Eyes dart, fingers find charms. No one admits they're scared, but no one jokes about it either. Words, too, carry weight. There are things you don't say aloud. Drown is one. Speaking it might summon the reality. Pig is another, at least among some of the older Caribbean hands who insist the word calls storms. They use nicknames instead: curly-tail, turf-rooter, anything but the forbidden syllable. You think it's absurd until you watch a man nearly choke on his own tongue trying to avoid saying it during a squall. Fear doesn't have to make sense to be real. Tattoos and piercings aren't just decoration. Some men swear they ward off evil spirits, or mark you as belonging to the sea so it won't take you too soon. A gold earring, they say, pays for your burial if you wash up on a foreign shore. You've seen pirates with their entire arms inked in symbols you don't recognize: anchors, mermaids, crosses, strange knots. When you ask what they mean, the answers are vague. Protection, they say, luck, reminder. The ink is armor against things that can't be blocked with steel. The deeper you get into this life, the more you realize superstition isn't a... On a quiet night, Rope leans over the rail beside you and points at the stars. "See that?" he says, tracing a constellation you half recognize. "That's the Navigator. Sailors been following him for 1,000 years, maybe more. He don't care if you're honest or pirate, merchant or navy. He just is. Same as the wind, same as the tide. Out here, we're small. The sea's big, the sky's bigger. All these little rules, touching wood, not whistling, throwing bread to the waves, it's just us trying to be polite guests in a house that don't belong to us." He spits into the water, a casual offering. "Ain't about being smart. It's about not being stupid enough to forget where you are." Combat isn't what you imagined. You pictured sword fights on deck, dramatic duels under billowing sails, the kind of thing they'd write ballads about. What you get instead is confusion, smoke, noise so loud it swallows thought, and men screaming orders you can barely hear. The first time the Serpent's Grin closes on a prize, your hands shake so badly you nearly drop your cutlass. Rope grabs your shoulder and shouts something you can't make out over the cannon fire. You nod anyway. It's all you can do. The approach is the strangest part. Hours of watching a speck on the horizon grow into a ship, then into a target. The crew moves with practiced efficiency, checking weapons, loading pistols, sharpening blades. The captain studies the prey through his glass, calculating angles, wind, speed. You're told to stay near Rope and do exactly what he does. "First rule," he says, checking the edge of his cutlass, "don't die. Second rule, help me not die. Everything else is extra." The goal, you learn, is intimidation first. Pirates don't want to fight if they don't have to. Fighting damages the prize, kills crew, wastes time. The black flag goes up, the signal clear: surrender or suffer.
Sometimes the merchant vessel strikes its colors immediately, crew throwing down weapons before a single shot is fired. Those are the easy days. The captain gets his cargo, the crew gets their shares, and nobody bleeds. But not every ship surrenders. Some fight back. That's when things get complicated.
Cannon fire comes first if the target resists. The Serpent's Grin closes range, and the gunners fire not to sink, but to disable. They aim for the rigging, the masts, anything that keeps the ship mobile. Chain shot tears through canvas and rope, splintering wood, sending yardarms crashing down. The noise is unbelievable, a deep, bone-shaking boom that makes your teeth rattle. Smoke fills the air, thick and sulphurous, stinging your eyes and throat. Through it all, the crew keeps working, reloading, adjusting aim, firing again.
The merchantmen fire back when they can. Cannonballs scream overhead or punch through hull planks with a sound like the world splitting. Splinters fly, wooden shrapnel sharp as knives. You see a man take a splinter to the leg and go down howling. Another drags him below deck. There's no pause. The ship keeps moving, the guns keep firing, and you're expected to keep your footing through all of it. You grip the rail and try not to look at the blood. Once the prey is crippled, mast down, rigging tangled, dead in the water, the boarding begins. Grappling hooks fly across the gap between ships, iron claws biting into wood and rope. Men haul on the lines, dragging the vessels together until they're near enough to jump. Some throw boarding planks across, others just leap the gap, trusting momentum and luck. You watch rope go over the side in one smooth motion and follow before you can think better of it. Your boots hit the enemy deck hard. The impact jolts your knees, but you're across.
The fighting is nothing like a duel. It's close, brutal, chaotic. Men swinging cutlasses in tight spaces, no room for flourish or technique. You parry a blow that would have taken your head off, shove the man back with your shoulder, and someone else runs him through from the side. There's no honor, no fair play. It's survival. You move in a pack with rope and two others, covering each other's backs, hacking through resistance as you push toward the quarterdeck.
Cutlasses are the weapon of choice for this work. Short, broad, single-edged blades built for slashing rather than thrusting. They're strong enough to hack through rope, canvas, bone. The handguard protects your fingers when another blade comes down. You're grateful for that within the first minute. Someone tries to disarm you with a hard strike, and the guard catches it. Your wrist aches, but your hand stays attached. You slash back and keep moving. Close-up of a pirate's hand gripping a cutlass with a protective handguard, blocking a hard downward strike from another blade, showing the practical design that saves fingers in chaotic shipboard combat. A pirate with multiple pistols tucked into his belt and sash, firing one at point-blank range, then dropping it and drawing another without reloading, surrounded by gun smoke in the chaos of boarding action. Clay grenades, stink pots, shattering on the deck of a merchant ship, releasing thick, noxious smoke filled with sulfur and tar. Defenders coughing and stumbling, half-blind and unable to fight effectively. A pirate with a heavy boarding axe splintering through a cabin door in powerful swings, wood breaking apart, while other pirates wait to rush through once the barrier is destroyed. Merchant ship defenders forming a desperate pike formation near the quarterdeck, long weapons jabbing out to keep boarders at bay, while pirates duck low and try to push forward, one pirate chopping a pike shaft in half with an axe. Pirates climbing up onto the higher deck of a merchant vessel, while defenders above lean over the rail with pistols and weapons. The vulnerable moment of scaling up during boarding, with one pirate falling back after being shot. Two pirates desperately guarding a grappling line that holds the ships together, fighting off merchant crew members trying to cut the rope, the line both a lifeline and a target during the boarding action.
The immediate aftermath of combat on a blood-stained deck, bodies lying still, wounded men groaning, pirates methodically soaring prisoners with tied hands from wounded crew, the exhausted survivors with haunted expressions.
Pirates looting a captured merchant ship's cargo hold, hauling up crates and barrels, stuffing pockets with coins and valuables, the quartermaster tallying prizes while blood still stains the deck nearby.
A captured merchant sloop engulfed in flames after being stripped of valuables. Fire spreading rapidly through canvas, tar, and old wood, while the defeated crew watches silently as prisoners on the pirate ship's deck. Pirates sitting together that night after battle, passing around a bottle of rum, exhausted faces showing relief and dark celebration. Rope checking on the narrator, the strange mood of survival after violence. Close-up of a young pirate's face in the aftermath, covered in gunpowder residue and blood spatter, eyes showing shock and exhaustion rather than triumph, holding an empty bottle while processing what they've survived. Port is different. The moment the Serpent's Grin drops anchor in a sheltered harbor, the energy on deck shifts. Men who were tense and focused at sea suddenly become restless, eager, alive in a new way. Shore leave is announced, shares are distributed, and within an hour half the crew is gone. Rowboats ferrying them to land, to taverns, to something that isn't salt and wood and endless water. You're handed your cut, coins heavy in a cloth pouch, and told to enjoy it while it lasts. Rope grins and says, "Try not to lose it all in one night." The port town is loud, crowded, chaotic in ways the ship never is. Narrow streets packed with people, sailors, merchants, prostitutes, beggars, traders hawking goods from carts. Buildings lean close overhead, wood and thatch, some painted bright colors now faded by sun and salt. The air smells like cooking wheat, smoke, sewage, spilled rum. Music drifts from open tavern doors. Somewhere nearby, someone's shouting in Spanish. You follow Rope through the press of bodies, trying not to lose sight of him. Nassau is the port you hear mentioned most often, especially by the older pirates. New Providence in the Bahamas, they call it, a pirate republic, a place where the crew makes the rules and the governors look the other way or get run off. Port Royal on Jamaica had the same reputation once, until it was destroyed and the authorities cracked down hard. Tortuga, too, between Cuba and Hispaniola, though its glory days are fading. These places are more than harbors. They're sanctuaries where pirate ships can refit, resupply, and sell stolen cargo without facing a noose. The first stop is always the tavern, not for the romance of it, but because that's where everything happens. News gets traded, deals get made, crews recruit, and fortunes change hands over cards and dice. The tavern Rope leads you to is dim and packed, tables crammed with men drinking, arguing, laughing too loud. A woman sings in the corner, voice cutting through the noise. The floor is sticky. Someone's already passed out near the door. You find a table, order rum, and settle in to watch. Drinking is serious business here. Rum is cheap and everywhere, distilled from Caribbean sugar, strong enough to strip paint. Men drink to celebrate, to forget, to pass time, to dull pain. You've seen men on the ship nurse a bottle for days. On shore, they drain them in hours. The mood escalates fast, friendly to rowdy to aggressive, depending on how much goes down and who's sitting nearby. Rope drinks steadily, but doesn't get sloppy. Pace yourself, he advises. Broke and hungover is a bad way to wake up. Gambling fills the gaps between drinks, cards, dice, anything you can wager on. Men bet their shares, their weapons, their boots if they're desperate or drunk enough. You watch a game of dice where a pirate loses a month's earnings in 10 minutes, curses and walks away. Another man wins 3 hands of cards in a row and buys the table around. Rope plays a few hands, wins more than he loses, pockets the coins. Luck's a fickle thing, he says. Don't trust her too much.
Prostitutes work the taverns and the streets, business blunt and transactional. Some are local women, making a living the only way the port economy allows. Others traveled here for the same reason the pirates did: opportunity, freedom from wherever they came from, a chance to profit from men flush with stolen gold. You see negotiations happen openly. Price, time, terms. There's no pretense. Rope declines an offer with a polite shake of his head. "Spit that coin already," he says, tapping his rum glass.
Fights break out constantly. A man says the wrong thing, or looks at someone's drink, or sits in the wrong chair. Fists fly, tables overturn, bottles shatter. Most of it ends quickly. A few punches, someone gets thrown out, everyone goes back to drinking. Occasionally it escalates, knives drawn, blood on the floor, bodies dragged outside. The tavern keeper barely reacts. This is normal. You learn to spot the signs and move before you're caught in the middle of it.
Food is better on shore, at least in variety. You eat roasted pork, fresh bread, fruit that isn't half rotten. It's not fancy, but after weeks of ship rations, it tastes incredible. Street vendors sell skewered meat, fried dough, things you can't identify but eat anyway. Rope buys a whole roasted chicken and tears into it with his hands, grease running down his chin. "Eat while you can," he says between bites. "Ship biscuit tastes worse once you remember this."
The markets sell everything. Stolen goods sit openly alongside legitimate trade. Bolts of silk, barrels of sugar, weapons, tools, jewelry, spices. Merchants don't ask where it came from. Pirates don't volunteer. You see a man haggling over a crate of French wine, another inspecting a pair of pistols. Rope wanders through, eye sharp, looking for deals. He buys a new knife, tests the edge, nods in satisfaction. You buy a better hat and a flask. The coins in your pouch are lighter already. Ships crowd the harbor. Pirate sloops, merchant brigs, fishing boats, naval vessels that might be friendly or might not, depending on who's paying who this month. Some ports tolerate pirates openly. Others play both sides, welcoming pirate gold while quietly cooperating with colonial authorities when pressured. The balance is delicate. You hear stories of ports that turned on pirates when the Navy showed up, and pirates who burned ports that betrayed them. Trust is thin on both sides. Repairs and resupply happen fast. The Serpent's Grin takes on fresh water, food, gunpowder, anything needed for the next voyage. Carpenters patch hull damage, sailmakers mend torn canvas. It's expensive, but necessary. Some of the crew's shares go right back into keeping the ship seaworthy. You help haul barrels and crates, the work familiar now, almost comforting in its routine. The captain negotiates with suppliers, counting coins, inspecting goods. Nothing is wasted. New crew members are recruited in port. Men looking for work, deserters from merchant or navy ships, locals desperate for a way out. The quartermaster interviews them in the tavern, asking about experience, skills, what they can bring. Some are turned away. Others sign the articles the same day and are rowing out to the ship by evening. You watch a man no older than you take the oath, hand on a Bible or a pistol, depending on the crew's mood. He looks terrified and determined in equal measure. You remember feeling the same way. Shore leave doesn't last long. A few days, maybe a week if the captain's feeling generous or waiting on intelligence. The longer you stay, the more dangerous it gets. Word spreads that pirates are in port, and eventually someone decides there's a reward worth claiming. Governors might send soldiers, naval ships might blockade the harbor, or rival pirate crews might decide you've overstayed and the port isn't big enough for everyone. You learn to enjoy the time without assuming it'll be there tomorrow.
Some men disappear on shore leave and never come back. They desert or get killed in a fight, or drink themselves into a grave, or find a reason to stay. A woman, a business opportunity, a chance at something other than the sea. The crew doesn't mourn them much. Desertion is understood, if not exactly respected. There's always someone else looking to fill the spot. The Serpent's Grin doesn't wait for anyone.
You spend an afternoon exploring the port alone, away from rope, away from the crew, just walking. You pass a church with peeling paint and a priest glaring at a group of drunk pirates outside. You see a row of shops selling navigational instruments, maps, curiosities from across the ocean. You watch children playing in the street, chasing a dog, laughing. For a moment, it almost feels normal, like you could be anywhere. Then a man stumbles past you, bleeding from a knife wound, and the illusion shatters.
Women pirates are rarer on shore than at sea, but they exist. You see a few in the taverns, some dressed as men, others not bothering to hide. They drink, gamble, fight, negotiate like anyone else. Nobody questions them here. The port doesn't care about propriety. Results matter. Coin, cargo, whether you can hold your own. You overhear one woman arguing with a merchant over the price of gunpowder, voice sharp, unyielding. She gets the deal she wants. The merchant looks relieved when she leaves. One night you find yourself on a rooftop with rope and a bottle, looking out over the harbor. Lanterns flicker on ships and along the docks. The noise from below is muffled, distant. The stars are bright, sharper than they ever were on land back home. Rope is quiet for a while, then says, "You ever think about staying?" You ask what he means. Here, port, land, walk away from the ship. You don't know how to answer. He nods like that's answer enough. Yeah, me neither. Not yet anyway.
The call comes on the third morning. Shore leave's over. The Serpent's Grin is ready to sail, and the captain wants to catch the tide. You row back with rope and a handful of others, most of them hung over, some still drunk. Coins spent, bellies full, heads aching. You climb aboard, and the familiar routine takes over, stowing gear, checking lines, preparing to leave. The port falls away behind you. Within an hour, it's just water again.
You realize port is a kind of dream, brief, intense, disconnected from the rest of your life. On the ship, everything has a purpose, a structure. On shore, it's chaos, freedom and danger tangled together, nothing solid to hold on to. You spent your share, ate well, drank too much, saw things you'll remember and things you'd rather forget. And now you're back to the sea, the only constant in a life that keeps shifting under your feet. Rope leans on the rail beside you and says, "Worth it?" You think about it. Yeah, it was.
Disease comes quietly at first. A man complains of a headache, another of a sore throat. You think nothing of it. Everyone's always aching from something out here. But then the fever sets in, spreading through the crew like wildfire through dry timber. Within days, half the men are sick. The ship slows, work becomes sloppy, and the atmosphere shifts from routine
to dread. You learn quickly that the sea doesn't just kill with storms and cannons. Sometimes it kills with things you can't see or fight. The surgeon does what he can, which isn't much. He's not a real doctor. Most ship surgeons aren't. He's a barber who learned to pull teeth and saw off limbs, armed with a chest of dubious remedies and a lot of improvisation. You watch him move through the sickbay, checking pulses, dosing men with mixtures that smell like rot and desperation. Some men get better, others don't. There's no pattern you can see, no logic. It's just luck, bad and good in equal measure. Scurvy is the slow killer. Weeks at sea without fresh fruit or vegetables, and men start to fall apart from the inside. Their gums bleed, teeth loosen and fall out. Old wounds reopen. Bruises appear without cause. They become weak, listless, unable to work. You've seen a man's leg turn black from a months-old injury that suddenly refused to heal. The cure is simple: citrus, fresh greens, anything with what the educated men call anti-scorbutic properties. But at sea, those things are rare. You hoard limes when you can get them.
Dysentery tears through the crew after a port stop where the water was bad. Men spend more time at the head than on deck, doubled over with cramps, faces gray. The smell is unbearable. The ship becomes a miserable, fouled place. Work barely happens. The healthy avoid the sick, but there's nowhere to go on a ship this small. Eventually everyone's exposed. You get it too. 3 days of agony that leave you weak and hollow. When it passes, you're grateful just to stand upright again.
Fevers are common and terrifying. Yellow fever, malaria, dengue. You don't always know which, and it doesn't always matter. The symptoms blur together. Burning skin, chills, delirium. Men thrash in their hammocks, calling out for mothers or lovers or God. Some die in their sleep. Others recover and are back on deck a week later, thinner and haunted. The mosquitoes in port are blamed, but no one knows how to stop them. You just accept that every harbor might carry death in its air. Injuries are easier to understand than disease, but no less deadly. A man falls from the rigging and breaks his leg, bone jutting through skin. The surgeon sets it, splints it, doses him with rum for the pain. Infection sets in anyway. Within a week, the leg is black and stinking. The surgeon says it has to come off or the rot will spread. You're asked to hold the man down during the amputation. You do. You try not to remember the screaming.
The amputation happens on deck, in daylight, where there's space and air. The man is given rum, lots of it, and a leather strap to bite down on. The surgeon works fast. Tourniquet, saw, cauterize with a hot iron. The smell of burning flesh makes you gag. The whole thing takes less than 10 minutes. Afterward, the severed leg is tossed overboard. The man lives, but he's done as a sailor. At the next port, he's put ashore with a small share and a crutch. You never see him again.
Gunshot wounds from battle are messy. Lead balls don't pierce cleanly. They shatter bone, tear muscle, carry fabric and dirt deep into the wound. The surgeon probes with metal instruments, trying to extract the ball and any debris. Sometimes he succeeds. Sometimes the wound festers, and the man dies slowly over days. You learn that gut shots are almost always fatal. Chest shots depend on luck, and limb shots might be survivable if infection doesn't take hold. There are no guarantees.
Splinters from cannon fire are worse than you think. When a cannonball strikes wood, it doesn't just punch a hole, it sends shards flying like shrapnel. Men get impaled by chunks of their own ship. You see a man with a foot-long splinter driven through his thigh, another with wood fragments embedded in his chest and arms. Removing them is agonizing. Leaving them in is deadly. The surgeon does his best, pulling fragments out one by one while the man screams or faints, sometimes both.
Burns happen in battle and in accidents. Gunpowder ignites unexpectedly, lamps tip over, cooking fires flare. Burned skin peels away, leaving raw, weeping flesh. The surgeon applies grease or honey, wraps it in cloth, and hopes. Some burns heal, others fester and kill through infection or shock. A man burned badly enough often wishes he died in the fire. You learn not to look too closely at the worst cases.
Tropical ulcers develop from small cuts or scratches that never quite heal. The heat, the damp, the filth, everything conspires to turn minor wounds into rotting sores. You've seen ulcers eat through skin to the bone. The surgeon cleans them, applies poultices, sometimes cuts away dead flesh. It rarely helps. The best treatment is getting to a dry climate and staying off your feet, neither of which is possible at sea. Men learn to live with the pain or die from it.
Tooth problems are constant. No one brushes, no one sees a proper dentist. Teeth rot, abscesses form, jaws swell with infection. The surgeon's solution is extraction, pliers, a strong grip, and someone to hold the patient down. You hear the crack when the tooth breaks, see the blood, watch the relief wash over the man's face when the infected tooth finally comes out. Sometimes the infection spreads anyway, and the man dies. A toothache can kill you out here.
Mental collapse happens too, though no one calls it disease. Men stare at the horizon for hours, stop speaking, refuse to work. Some weep for no reason. Others become violent, lashing out at crewmates over nothing. There's no surgeon's remedy for a broken mind. The crew tries patience first, then discipline, then isolation. If a man becomes too dangerous or too far gone, he's put ashore at the next port, or, in the worst cases, quietly thrown overboard at night. No one talks about it afterward. Lice and fleas are unavoidable. They infest clothes, hammocks, bedding. Everyone itches. You scratch until you bleed, and the scratches get infected, and the cycle continues. Some men shave their heads to reduce the burden. Others just endure. Occasional inspections happen. The quartermaster checks for lice, orders men to boil their clothes, scrub their hammocks. It helps for a few days. Then the parasites return. You learn to sleep through the itching.
Venereal disease spreads through the crew after port visits. Men return with more than coin spent and hangovers. The symptoms appear days or weeks later: sores, discharge, pain. The surgeon doses them with mercury compounds that are almost as dangerous as the disease. Some men recover. Others carry the infection for years, suffering through flare-ups and complications. There's shame attached, but not much. It's common enough that everyone knows someone dealing with it.
Malnutrition weakens everyone over time. Even when there's food, it's not good food. Ship biscuit, salt pork, dried peas, none of it provides what bodies need for months at sea. Men become gaunt, their energy flags, their tempers shorten. Fresh provisions in port help, but the improvement never lasts. You feel it in yourself, a constant low-grade exhaustion, a sense that your body is slowly consuming itself. You eat what's given and try not to think about it.
The sickbay is a grim place. Hammocks strung close together, men lying in their own sweat and waste, the air thick with the smell of sickness. You're sent down to bring water or help move a body. You try to breathe through your mouth. Some of the men are delirious, muttering nonsense.
Others stare at the ceiling, silent and resigned. The surgeon moves among them, doing what little he can. You're grateful when you can leave and return to the open deck. Death at sea from disease is lonelier than death in battle. There's no drama, no final stand, just a man getting weaker and weaker until he's gone. The body is sewn into canvas and dropped overboard with a brief prayer or no ceremony at all. The crew moves on because there's no choice. The dead man's hammock is cleaned, his belongings auctioned off to the crew, and someone else takes his place. Within a week, it's as if he was never there. Rope catches a fever midway through a voyage. For 3 days, he's out of his hammock, only to vomit over the side. You bring him water, check on him when you can. He's too weak to joke, too miserable to talk. You worry he won't make it. You've seen men die from less. But on the 4th day, the fever breaks. He's pale and shaky, but alive. "Thought I was done," he says, voice hoarse. "Not yet," you tell him. He grins weakly. "Not yet."
You realize that out here, your body isn't fully yours. It's a tool, a resource, subject to forces beyond your control. Disease, injury, malnutrition, they're just part of the cost of this life. You do what you can, wash when possible, eat what's available, avoid the worst risks. But mostly you rely on luck and hope your turn doesn't come. Every morning you wake up healthy is a small victory. Every night you go to sleep without fever or pain is a gift. That's the bargain. That's what it means to survive.
Navigation is half science, half intuition, and entirely essential. Without it, you're just drifting on a very large ocean with no idea where you are or where you're going. The navigator is one of the most valued men on the ship, right up there with the captain and the quartermaster. He's the one who keeps charts, plots courses, reads the instruments, and somehow turns stars and numbers into a path through thousands of miles of empty water. You watch him work with a mixture of respect and incomprehension. The charts are beautiful and terrifying. Hand-drawn maps on thick paper or vellum showing coastlines, islands, harbors, and hazards. Some are accurate, others are wildly wrong, based on decades-old information or pure guesswork. The navigator treats them like sacred texts, carefully unrolling them on the chart table, weighing down the corners, tracing routes with his finger. He marks positions, notes wind patterns, updates details when new information comes in. A good chart is worth its weight in gold. A bad one can kill everyone aboard.
Dead reckoning is the basic method. You track your direction with a compass, estimate your speed, and calculate how far you've traveled. Direction is easy enough. The compass points north, more or less. Speed is trickier. The crew drops a log tied to a knotted rope over the stern, counts how many knots pass through their hands in a set time, and that gives you speed in knots. Distance equals speed times time. Simple math, but it accumulates errors. A small mistake compounds over days until you're miles off course and don't know it.
The sun is your most reliable guide during the day. At noon, when the sun reaches its highest point, the navigator uses a sextant or cross staff to measure the angle between the sun and the horizon. That angle, combined with tables in a nautical almanac, tells you your latitude, how far north or south you are. It's not perfect, but it's close enough. You watch him squint through the instrument, making tiny adjustments, muttering calculations. The result gets marked on the chart with a small X.
The stars come out at night, and with them different methods. The North Star, Polaris, sits almost directly above the North Pole,
so measuring its angle above the horizon gives you latitude in the northern hemisphere. In the south, where Polaris disappears below the horizon, navigators use other stars or constellations. You learn to recognize a few: the Southern Cross, Orion's Belt, the Pleiades. The sky becomes a map, readable if you know the language. Longitude is the hard problem. Latitude is relatively easy. Measure the sun or stars, do some math, done. But longitude, how far east or west you are, requires knowing the exact time and comparing it to the time at a reference point, usually Greenwich in England. Ships don't have reliable clocks. Pendulum clocks don't work at sea. The motion throws them off. Chronometers exist, but are rare and expensive. Most navigators estimate longitude through dead reckoning and hope for the best. It's imprecise, and everyone knows it. Landfall is both relief and danger. After weeks at sea, spotting land means you're close to your destination, or at least close to something. But approaching an unknown coast in the dark or in fog or with inaccurate charts is a navigator's nightmare. Reefs and shoals lurk just below the surface. Rocky coasts can tear a hull apart. The crew posts extra lookouts. The navigator rechecks his calculations, and everyone tenses until the ship is safely anchored or past the danger. You've seen ships wrecked within sight of land. It's a bitter way to die. Soundings help when approaching shore. A leadsman casts a weighted line overboard, measures the depth, and reports it to the navigator. The lead weight has a hollow bottom filled with tallow that picks up samples of the seafloor: sand, mud, shells, rock. Experienced navigators recognize these samples and use them to identify their position. 15 fathoms, sandy bottom, might mean you are approaching a specific harbor. It's knowledge passed down through generations, part science and part craft. Currents are invisible and treacherous. The ocean isn't still. Massive rivers of water flow through it, driven by wind, temperature, and the Earth's rotation. The Gulf Stream, the equatorial current, countless others. They can push you miles off course without you realizing it. The navigator accounts for them when it can, based on experience and charts, but it's always an educated guess. Sometimes you're fighting the current for days, making slow progress. Other times it pushes you along faster than the wind alone could manage. Weather changes everything. A storm can blow you hundreds of miles off course. Fog makes navigation nearly impossible. You can't see the sun, the stars, the horizon, or any landmarks. You're sailing blind, relying entirely on dead reckoning and prayer. Calm winds leave you drifting, unable to control your direction. The navigator adjusts constantly, recalculating based on conditions, trying to stay as close to the intended course as possible. Some days he succeeds. Other days you just survive and figure out where you are later. Islands are both blessing and curse. They provide fresh water, food, shelter, and navigational landmarks. But they're also hazards, hard to spot at night, surrounded by reefs, sometimes inhabited by people who don't welcome visitors. The navigator studies charts carefully before approaching any island, looking for safe anchorages and known dangers. You've seen him refuse to approach islands that looked perfectly safe because the chart warned of submerged rocks or tricky currents. His caution keeps the ship afloat. The crew doesn't always understand navigation, but they respect it. To most of the men, the navigator is performing a kind of magic, staring at the sky, scribbling numbers, and somehow knowing where they are in the middle of an endless ocean. Some are suspicious of it, preferring to trust their gut feelings or the captain's instincts. Others are fascinated. You fall somewhere in between. You don't understand the math, but you recognize skill when you see it. The navigator teaches you a few basics: how to read a compass, how to use the sun's position to estimate time and direction, how to identify a few key stars. It's not enough to make you a navigator, but it's enough to keep you oriented. Every sailor should know which way is north, he says, and every pirate should know how to find home, or at least the nearest tavern. He's joking, but there's truth underneath. Knowledge is survival. Mistakes in navigation can be catastrophic. Miss a reef and the ship runs aground, hull breached, cargo lost, crew stranded or drowned. Miss your destination and you waste weeks searching, running low on supplies, morale collapsing. The navigator carries that weight. Every decision he makes could mean life or death. You see it in his face sometimes, the exhaustion, the constant calculating, the fear of making the one error that dooms everyone. It's a lonely responsibility.
Pirates navigate differently than merchant or naval ships. Merchants follow established routes, trading safety for predictability. Naval ships have orders and destinations dictated by command. Pirates go where the opportunity is, chasing rumors of treasure ships, avoiding naval patrols, seeking hidden anchorages. The navigator has to be flexible, creative, willing to take risks. He plots courses through uncharted waters, finds harbors that aren't on official maps, and keeps the ship moving when others would wait for better conditions. Some navigators use unusual methods. You hear stories of men who can smell land before they see it, different scents carried on the wind from vegetation, smoke, or tidal flats. Others read the color of the water, the behavior of birds, the patterns of waves. These aren't in books or almanacs. They're learned through years at sea, passed down through observation and trial. The ship's navigator uses some of these tricks, checking the water's hue, watching for seabirds that indicate nearby land. Science and folklore blend together. The chart table becomes a gathering place for planning. The captain, the navigator, the quartermaster, they huddle over maps, discussing options, where to hunt next, which route to take, where to resupply. You're allowed to listen sometimes, standing at the edge, absorbing the debate. The navigator points out hazards and distances. The captain weighs risks and rewards. The quartermaster considers the crew's mood and supplies. Decisions emerge from the conversation, and the ship's course changes accordingly. You realize navigation is about more than finding your way. It's about control in a place that resists control. The ocean doesn't care about your plans. It's vast, indifferent, constantly moving. Navigation is humanity's attempt to impose order on chaos, to draw lines and names on something that has neither. It's imperfect, often wrong, but it's what you have. Without it, you're at the mercy of wind and current and luck. With it, you have a chance. One night, the navigator lets you take a sighting with the sextant. You hold the brass instrument, try to line up the horizon and a star through the mirrors and lenses. It's harder than it looks. The ship rocks, your hands shake, the star keeps slipping out of view. Finally, you get a reading, call out the angle. He checks it, nods. Close enough, he says. You'd only be 10 miles off. He's teasing, but you feel a small flush of pride anyway. 10 miles is better than 1,000. Navigation, you come to understand, is the invisible thread holding everything together. Without it, there's no voyage, no raids, no treasure, no return to port. Just aimless drifting until supplies run out or a storm finishes you. The navigator doesn't fight with cutlass or cannon, doesn't drink the hardest or talk the loudest, but he's essential. Every morning he checks the charts, takes his measurements, makes his calculations. And every day the ship moves closer to wherever it's going, or at least closer to somewhere. In a life full of uncertainty, that's as close to certainty as you get.
The end comes differently for everyone. Some pirates die in battle, quick and bloody. Others waste away from disease or injury. A few did rich enough to retire, buying land or a business and pretending they were never outlaws. Most just fade, deserting at port, getting caught and hanged, or lost at sea in storms that leave no trace. You think about these endings more than you used to. Mortality isn't abstract anymore. It's the man who slept in the hammock next to yours, now gone. It's the empty space at the table. It's the question you avoid asking yourself. How will your story end?
The articles you signed feel different now than they did that first day. Back then, they were just words, rules to follow, shares to earn, a way into this life. Now you understand what you agreed to. The violence isn't theoretical. The danger isn't romantic. You've killed men, or helped kill them. You've stolen cargo that belonged to someone else, destroyed livelihoods, left people stranded or dead. The flag you sail under doesn't make it noble. It just makes it organized.
Rope asks you one evening what you'll do when this is over. You don't have an answer. Go home? There's nothing there for you now, or at least nothing that fits for you've become. Stay at sea? Forever? Until you died or get too old or make one mistake too many? Buy your way into a quiet life somewhere? You've seen men try that. Ex-pirates opening taverns or shops, always looking over their shoulders, wondering if someone will recognize them and turn them in for the bounty. There's no clean exit from this life.
The crew has changed since you joined. Some faces are the same. Rope, the captain, the quartermaster. Others are new, replacements for the dead and departed. The ship itself has changed too, repaired and modified so many times that little of the original remains. It's a living thing, constantly rebuilt, like the crew that sails it. You wonder if you're the same person who signed those articles months ago. Probably not. That person was naive, reckless, desperate. You're still reckless and desperate, but the naivete is gone.
Money matters less than you thought it would. Your shares add up, coins and goods from captured prizes, divided fairly according to the articles. You spend some in port, save some, lose some to gambling or theft or bad decisions. But it doesn't feel like wealth. It feels like compensation for risk, a ledger of dangers survived. You're not getting rich. You're getting paid to stay alive in a job that's trying to kill you. The math doesn't favor you in the long run.
Freedom was the promise, the reason you're here. No masters, no landlords, no rules but the ones you agreed to. And there's truth in that. You've seen and done things that would have been impossible in your old life. You've sailed across oceans, fought battles, walked through ports where law barely exists. But you've also learned that freedom has a price. You're free from one set of rules, but bound by others just as strict. Free from one kind of danger, but surrounded by new ones. Freedom isn't the absence of constraint. It's choosing which constraints you'll accept.
The captain addresses the crew one morning after a successful raid. Shares are distributed, repairs are underway, morale is high. He talks about the next voyage, the opportunities ahead, the life they've built together, outside the reach of kings and governors. The crew cheers. You cheer too, because that's what you do. But privately, you wonder how long this can last. The navies are getting more aggressive, the safe ports fewer, the easy targets scarcer. This golden moment, if it ever was golden, feels like it's fading. You think about the people you've hurt, the merchant crews who surrendered and lost everything, the ones who fought back and died, the families waiting for ships that will never return. You tell yourself it's survival, that it's no different from what navies and merchants do to each other, that the world is cruel and you're just navigating it. Sometimes you believe that. Other times, late at night, you don't. You carry those faces with you. You suspect you always will.
Rope tells you he's thinking about leaving. Not immediately, but soon. Another year, maybe 2, he says. Get enough saved up, find some quiet place, disappear. You ask if he thinks it'll work. He shrugs. Probably not. But staying out here definitely doesn't work forever. So you try, right? You nod. You understand the logic. You're just not sure you're ready to act on it yourself. Not yet.
There are moments of beauty amid the violence and hardship. Sunrises that paint the ocean gold. Dolphins racing the bow. The satisfaction of a job done well. A ship taken without bloodshed. A storm weathered. A course successfully navigated. Nights on deck with the crew, sharing stories and songs, feeling part of something larger than yourself. These moments don't erase the rest, but they make it bearable. They remind you why people choose this life, even knowing how it usually ends.
You've learned skills you never expected. Navigation basics, ship repair, combat tactics, how to read men and situations, how to survive on little, how to keep going when everything hurts. Some of these skills will translate to other lives. Others are useless anywhere but here. You're not sure which category you fall into anymore. Useful elsewhere, or only suited for this narrow, dangerous world. The sea itself has changed you. It's no longer the romantic unknown it was from shore. It's a workplace, a battlefield, a graveyard, a home. You know its moods, its dangers, its indifference. You've learned to read weather, to feel the ship's movement, to sleep through storms. You've become a creature of this environment, adapted to it in ways you can't quite articulate. Going back to land, really going back, permanently, might be harder than you think. Authority looks different now. The captain has power because the crew grants it, because he's competent and fair and leads well. The moment that changes, he's out. You've seen it happen on other ships, captains voted off, replaced, sometimes killed. It's democracy of a sort, brutal and practical. It's taught you that power isn't inherent. It's negotiated, earned, maintained. And it can vanish in an instant if you lose the trust of the people below you. You write a letter one day in port, though you're not sure you'll ever send it. It's addressed to someone from your old life, family maybe, or a friend. You try to explain where you are, what you've become, why you left. The words don't come easily. How do you describe this life to someone who's never lived it? How do you justify choices you're not sure you can justify to yourself? You fold the letter, tuck it away. Maybe someday you'll have better words, or maybe you'll just leave it unsent, a record of who you were at this moment. The ship takes damage in a storm, mast cracked, rigging torn, hull leaking. It limps into port for repairs that will take weeks. Some of the crew scatters, unsure if they'll return. You stay, helping with the work, because there's nothing else to do and nowhere else to be. Rope stays too. Together you haul timber, tar planks, splice rope. It's hard, tedious work, but it's also satisfying in a simple way, fixing something broken, making it seaworthy again, building instead of destroying for once. A naval patrol nearly catches you one afternoon. The Serpent's Grin is faster,
slips away through a channel the larger warship can't follow. But it's close, too close. You see the men on the naval deck, recognizing them for what they are. Sailors like you, just serving a different flag. If they'd caught you, you'd hang. They know it.
You realize one day that you've stopped counting. Time used to be measured in days until you could leave, until you'd saved enough, until you'd earned your freedom. Now it's just time, one voyage bleeding into the next, one port indistinguishable from the last. You're not sure if that means you've accepted this life or just given up on imagining another one. Maybe there's no difference.
The crew gathers on deck one evening as the sun sets. No particular reason, no celebration, no crisis, just a quiet moment. Someone starts singing, an old shanty you've heard 100 times. Others join in. You do too, your voice blending with theirs. For a few minutes, everything else falls away. The danger, the violence, the uncertainty, it's all still there, but it's background noise. What matters is this: men singing together on a ship at sunset, alive for one more day.
Rope asks you again what you're running from. You've deflected the question before, but this time you answer honestly. Not running from anything, you say. Running towards something. You're just not sure what yet. He nods, satisfied. Fair enough, he says. Let me know when you figure it out. You promise you will. You're not sure it's a promise you can keep.
The ship sails on. There's cargo to hunt, storms to weather, ports to reach, shares to divide. The cycle continues, because that's what cycles do. You stand at the rail, watching the horizon, and wonder how much longer you'll be here. Another month? Another year? Until it ends badly? Or until you find a way out? Or until you stop asking the question altogether? You don't know. But for now, the wind is good, the ship is sound, and there's work to do. So you turn from the rail and get back to it, one day at a time. That's all any pirate gets.